Chapter 953. Jianan and Gatha. As he spoke, the tall young man let out a furious roar and stomped his foot. The aura of an initial stage sovereign erupted from his body, as he instantly arrived in front of Zhuowen, and threw a punch at Zhuowen's face. Zhuowen was completely indifferent. Looking at the fist that was getting closer and closer, he continued to count, 3. Since you won't disappear, I'll take the initiative to make you disappear. A cold glint flickered in Zhuowen's eyes as he extended his right hand and grabbed the tall young man's fist. Subsequently, Yuan power gushed out from his palm as a terrifying force was released. Crack. The crisp sound of bones cracking resounded as the tall young man felt a sharp pain in his arm, before he lost all feeling in his right arm. Ah, my right arm. The tall young man let out a miserable howl as he held his right arm and retreated. He stared viciously at Zhuowen. This person actually dared to cripple his arm. He was simply too hateful. What are you guys still standing there for? Take him down. The tall young man ordered the 4 subordinates behind him who were in a daze. Yes. The 4 of them responded as they released their strongest aura and rushed towards Zhuowen. Their cultivations were even weaker than the tall young man, as they were only at the pinnacle of the Xuanzuan realm. Bang! 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 For muffled sounds rang out as the 4 of them were sent flying by Zhuowen, without any ability to retaliate. All of them were badly battered and their auras were weak. Still want to try? Zhuowen glanced indifferently at the tall young man, as the aura on his body continued to rise. Gusts of Yuan power whirlwinds swept out from his body. Middle stage sovereign stage? The tall young man's pupils shrank as he cursed his bad luck. He hurriedly left the cabin with his 4 subordinates. The third-class cabins were the cheapest cabins on the boundless sailboat, and they were also the cabins with the worst conditions. Generally, those who purchased these third-class cabins were basically rogue cultivators, or disciples of smaller clans who were in dire straits. It was precisely because of this that there were very few young cultivators who had reached the supreme realm in the third-class cabins. This was also the reason why the tall young man could act like a tyrant in the third-class cabin. After all, the majority of the youths in the third-class cabin were not a match for the tall young man. However, Zhuowen was an exception. He wanted to bring the 5 celestial venerables to the outer court, so the ticket price was 6 times that of an ordinary person. In order to save money, Zhuowen resolutely bought a third-class ticket. Thank you for your help, big brother. May I know your name? After beating up the 5 youths, the stubborn youth brought the young girl to Zhuowen and asked excitedly as he stared at Zhuowen. Just now, Zhuowen had defeated the tall young man with a single move, and then easily dealt with the 4 mystique venerables. That kind of strength had truly shocked the youth, and even made him admire him. This was because the Zhuowen before him was not much older than him. He was only about 20 years old, yet he was already able to possess such terrifying strength. He was definitely a genius. As for the pure young girl beside the youth, she secretly glanced at Zhuowen with her large watery eyes. A trace of shyness appeared on her delicate face from time to time. Zhuowen rubbed his nose as he looked at the young man in front of him and the shy young girl behind him. He had a good impression of them. The young man in front of him was only about 19 years old, while the young girl was about 18 years old. Their eyes were clear without any impurities. It was obvious that they had not experienced much of the ways of the world outside. They were like blank pieces of paper. My name is Zhuowen. I'm heading to the outer court of the Jiaxin Academy to participate in the entrance examination. Zhuowen smiled faintly. Big brother Zhuowen, so you're also here to participate in the outer court examination of the Jiaxin Academy. My sister and I are here too. I'm Jianan, and my sister is Gatha. The youth giggled. As for Jiaxia, who was hiding behind Jianan, she gathered her courage and clenched her fists tightly. She arrived before Zhuowen and said in a stuttering manner, Greetings, big brother Zhua. Thank you, big brother Zhua, for helping my brother beat up those bad guys earlier. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, It's nothing. After all, they were the ones who provoked me first. Let's talk in the private room. There are too many people here. Jianan and Gatha nodded. Soon after, the 7 of them entered the private room. It had to be said that the private room was very simple and crude. Furthermore, the area was very small. The 7 of them felt a little cramped in the private room. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He didn't expect the conditions in the third-class cabin to be so bad. Previously, he had followed Emperor Yan and the others to the first-class and second-class cabins. In those cabins, each person had a very spacious room. Why was it that the third-class cabins had 7 people squeezed into a simple and crude private room? The difference was a little too big. However, Zhuowen did not care too much about it. He quickly got used to it. After all, the boundless sailboat had only arrived at the outer court of the Jiaxin Academy for 3 days. The entrance examination of the outer court would only begin today. Furthermore, it would last for 7 days. Hence there was still time. After they sat down in the box, Kanan began to chat with Zhuowen in a rather excited manner. Of course, Kanan was basically talking to himself, while Zhuowen merely sat there and listened to Kanan in silence. Following Jianan's narration, Zhuowen also learned of Jianan and Gatha's origins. It turned out that the 2 of them came from a small family in the far west of the eastern lands. However, the 2 of them were exceptionally talented. Although they were only born in a small family, their cultivation speed far exceeded that of their peers. Jianan was only 19 years old. His cultivation had already reached the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm. Gatha's talent was even more powerful than Jianan's. She was only 18 years old, but her cultivation was the same as Jianan's. It was because of the powerful talent that the 2 siblings displayed that their family placed all their hopes on them. They hoped that the 2 siblings could change their family and lead their family to prosperity. In order to pursue a stronger realm and resources, the Jiaxin Academy had also recently started to recruit students. Hence, the 2 siblings carried the high hopes of their family and came to the desolate ancient city. They boarded the boundless sailboat and headed to the outer court. When Zhuowen asked the siblings why the elders of their family did not follow them, Jianan awkwardly said, "The tickets for the boundless sailboat are too expensive. 2 third-class tickets have already used up most of the family's savings. The family is unable to afford a third person's ticket." Zhuowen nodded. Jianan and Gatha were clearly geniuses who were born in the grassroots. The fate of these geniuses was very similar to Zhuowen's. After all, he had also risen from a small family. He had to overcome obstacles step by step to reach his current level. After a series of conversations, Jianan and Gatha's relationship with Zhuowen became even closer. They were no longer as reserved as before. "Big brother Zhua, you're only 20 years old, yet your cultivation has already reached the middle stage of the exalted stage. Your talent is truly extraordinary. The chances of you successfully entering the outer court's assessment this time is very high," Jianan said to Zhuowen with a smile. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "That may not be the case. The outer court recruitment this time is open to all regions outside of the 9 netherworld realm. The eastern lands are too vast. There are countless geniuses and experts as common as clouds. I'm afraid that I'm not much in front of those peerless geniuses." Jianan nodded in deep agreement. He used to be content with staying in his family's area. Hence, he had always thought that his talent was already peerless. It was only after he entered the desolate ancient city that his thoughts completely changed. The world was far larger than he had imagined. In this vast world, there would always be more monstrous geniuses, stronger experts, and disciples with stronger backgrounds than him. Hence, the trace of arrogance in his heart had long since been restrained. After chatting for a while, Gatha suddenly tugged at the corner of Jianan's clothes and said softly, "Brother, the air in this room is so stuffy. Why don't we go to the deck to get some fresh air?" Jianan was stunned. He patted Gatha's head and said with a doting smile, "All right, brother will accompany you." As he spoke, Jianan turned to Zhuowen and said, "Big brother Zhua, I'm going to the deck to get some fresh air with my sister. Do you want to come with us?" "I'm bored anyway. I'll go with you." Zhuowen nodded and did not refuse. As he spoke, Zhuowen instructed Xing Tianzuan and the other 4 to stay in the room. Then, he followed Jianan and Gatha out of the room and walked up the stairs to the deck. Many people in the aisle saw Zhuowen walking over. Their eyes were filled with dread as they dispersed. Just now, Zhuowen had crippled the right hand of the tall young man with a single move. Many people in the corridor had seen it clearly, so now everyone was afraid of him like a tiger, and no one dared to provoke him. Zhuowen did not pay attention to these people's reactions. Instead, he followed behind Jianan. Soon they arrived at the top deck. The deck was very large and could accommodate thousands of people. At this moment, there were many people chatting on the deck. It was quite lively. Above the deck there were purple halos. Outside the purple halos, there were countless terrifying winds and waves. They were now in the sea of bitterness. The danger in the sea of misery did not only come from the tsunamis of the sea of misery, but also from the unpredictable climate. Moreover, the sky above the sea of misery was covered by huge dark clouds all year round. Lightning as thick as a bucket could be seen everywhere. Powerful hurricanes would often raise the sea water up to tens of thousands of feet high, and then violently smash it back down. These dangers were fatal. Even emperors who were not strong enough could die in the harsh environment of the Sea of Misery. Only high emperors like Jianmu had the right to pass through the harsh environment unscathed. If I can become a high emperor one day, I won't need to ride the world's edge sailboat. I'll be able to cross the Sea of Misery alone. Jianan looked up at the harsh climate above the Sea of Misery, and could not help but murmur emotionally. The strong come from the weak. As long as you have the tenacity to pursue the strong, it's only a matter of time before you become strong, Zhuowen said nonchalantly. On the other hand, Jianan's eyes flickered with a bright light. The gaze with which he stared at Zhuowen had also changed. Zhuowen's words had enlightened him. There was nothing in the world that you could not do. There were only things that you could not imagine. As long as you were willing to work hard, you would eventually be able to make up for your lack of talent. It's you? I never thought that you would be on the world's edge sailboat as well. Chapter 954. Undying armored soul. What entered his eyes was an enchanting woman, with a voluptuous figure. At this moment, the woman was pointing at Zhuowen, with a trace of anger on her face. It's her. Zhuowen was startled, and his eyes narrowed. The woman in front of him was the one who wanted to compete with him for the damaged emperor weapon in the desolate ancient city. Zhuowen remembered that this woman was called Chun Hui, and she was from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. Moreover, the third prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, Yuansheng, was very good to this woman. At that time, he wanted to snatch the damaged emperor weapon from Zhuowen for her sake, but Jianmu stopped him, and he left resentfully. At this moment, Chun Hui didn't have Yuansheng by her side. She came alone, and pointed at Zhuowen's nose without any scruples. Hand over that thing. Otherwise, our Yaoguang Holy Dynasty won't let you go. This is your only way to survive. As soon as Chun Hui's words came out, Jianan and Gatha, who were standing not far from Zhuowen, were shocked. Although they came from a small family in the far west of the eastern land, they had heard of the 7 most powerful forces outside of the 9 netherworld realm. The Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was one of the 7 most powerful forces. In their opinion, such a force was an unreachable existence. In front of such a force, their family was like an ant. The siblings stared at Zhuowen's figure, and their eyes became a little strange. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was good, he wasn't a so-called monstrous genius. Moreover, from the way he bought a third-class ticket, they could tell that Zhuowen's background wasn't very strong. However, Zhuowen knew this woman from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. The siblings couldn't help but be curious about Zhuowen's identity. Zhuowen sneered. You want me to hand over that thing? Why should I? Chun Hui's beautiful eyes curved dangerously, and she said coldly, You mean you don't want to hand it over? What do you think? Zhuowen said mockingly. Boom. A terrifying aura gushed out. Chun Hui's beautiful eyes were filled with anger as she said, I will ask you one more time. Are you going to hand it over or not? A late-stage supreme being? When Jianan and Gatha sensed Chun Hui's aura, their faces turned pale. They hadn't expected her to have such a powerful cultivation base. As expected, the geniuses of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty couldn't be underestimated. The commotion on Chun Hui's side naturally attracted the attention of many nearby martial artists. Numerous gazes shot over. 3 young men walked out from the crowd and stood behind Chun Hui. They stared at Zhuowen coldly. They were also geniuses of the Alcate Holy Dynasty. They had been attracted by the commotion caused by Chun Hui's group. When they discovered the Chun Hui assembly, they naturally came to her side. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "No. Good. If you don't want to hand it over, I will take it away from you. How dare you be so arrogant in front of the geniuses of the Alcate Holy Dynasty?" Chunhui cried out. Like an ape, her figure flashed and arrived in front of Zhuowen. A red longsword had unknowingly appeared in her jade-like hand. She waved her right hand and flames surged out, causing the surrounding temperature to rise. Clang! Zhuowen stretched out his right hand, and a blood-red spear appeared in his hand. He flicked the tip of the spear, and it accurately hit the red longsword. The sound of metal colliding rang out, and Chun Hui's figure froze in midair, as if time had stopped. "Let's attack together and take down this kid." Chun Hui's eyes narrowed. She twisted her waist, and changed the momentum of her sword. Blazing flames gushed out and shrouded Zhuowen. The three young men looked at each other and nodded. Then, they turned into three shadows and rushed towards Zhuowen. They formed a triangle and surrounded Zhuowen. "You are bullying me with numbers. Despicable!" Jianan shouted angrily, and rushed towards the three young men. He wanted to stop them from attacking Zhuowen. "How dare a kid at the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm stand in our way? Get lost!" One of the three young men cried out coldly. He pointed with his right hand, and a powerful yuan power surged out, and smashed heavily onto Jianan's body. After which, Jianan was sent flying without any ability to resist and fell to the ground. "Brother, are you okay?" Gatha came to Jianan's side and asked worriedly. "I am fine. These people from the Alcate Holy Dynasty are despicable. They are besieging Brother Zhuowen. I will not let them succeed." As he spoke, Jianan seemed as if nothing had happened, and he pounced towards the three young men once more. He seemed like a desperate man that didn't hold back at all. "You are courting death. The two of you go and help Miss Chun Hui. Leave this kid to me. I will let him have a taste of his own medicine." The eyes of the young man who had attacked earlier were cold. He spoke to the other two young men, before he headed towards Jianan. "How dare a little ant make a fuss in front of me? You don't know how to write the word death." The young man arrived in front of Jianan in an instant. He flipped his right hand and surging origin energy blasted out. Jianan raised his hands to block the attack. However, the difference in strength was too great. Jianan was sent flying again, and spat out a mouthful of blood. "You want to be a hero with such little strength? You are simply courting death." The young man's eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Jianan, who was knocked to the ground. He intended to turn around and rush towards Zhuowen's group. Swoosh! The sound of the air being torn apart suddenly came from the young man. When the young man came to his senses, he saw Jianan's angry face was getting bigger and bigger in his eyes. Bang! The young man's waist was hit, and he couldn't help but stagger a few steps back. He looked at Jianan in surprise and said in a low voice, "You are just a little ant from the Xuanzuan realm. How can you still have strength after receiving 2 full strength attacks from me? Bullying the weak? Your Yaoguang Holy Dynasty is one of the 7 great forces in the Eastern Land. How can you be so despicable?" Jianan panted and said angrily, "Humph! Our Yaoguang Holy Dynasty doesn't need an ant like you to teach us a lesson. Die!" The young man snorted coldly and attacked Jianan again. This time, he didn't show any mercy. Puchi! This time, the young man landed a heavy blow on Jianan's chest. Jianan's waist arched like a cooked prawn. Blood spurted out like a faucet that wasn't turned on properly. Many people were shocked when they saw this. The young man didn't show any mercy in this attack. He had used his full strength. Many people knew that Jianan was going to die this time. However, to their surprise, Jianan stood up again and pointed at the young man, shouting that the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was despicable and shameless. Jianan's physique is a little special. At this moment, Chun Hui had already gathered the other 3 to besiege Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen seemed to be at ease. At the same time, he was still in the mood to pay attention to Jianan's situation. Jianan had been beaten up several times, but he seemed to be fine. Zhuowen was a little confused. "How dare you multitask while fighting with us? I think you are courting death." Chun Hui's beautiful eyes were filled with anger when she saw Zhuowen's behavior. At the same time, there was a trace of shock in her eyes. The three of them had joined forces, but they still couldn't take down Zhuowen. Moreover, Zhuowen seemed to be at ease. I don't want to play anymore. Let's end this battle, Zhuowen said indifferently. Immediately, he waved his blood spear. Suddenly, a terrifying sea of blood swept out from the void behind him. It turned into a blood-red vortex and swept towards Chun Hui and the other two, trying to engulf them. You don't want to play anymore? Do you think you are strong? You are just a mid-stage sovereign. Do you think you are qualified to say that? Let's kill him together. Zhuowen's words clearly provoked Chun Hui, causing her to shriek. She swung the red longsword in her jade-like hand and terrifying flames gushed out, forming a huge sea of fire around her. The other two also used their strongest moves, wanting to take down Zhuowen completely. Break! A dense and cold voice rang out. Immediately, the surrounding sea of fire was completely turned into powder and extinguished. Next, Chun Hui and the other two felt a powerful energy surge over. Before this energy, they felt as helpless as they were facing a vast ocean. This energy was too vast and boundless. Puff! The three of them spat out fresh blood and flew backwards. After which they smashed heavily onto the ground. The young man, who was originally entangled with Jia Nan, had clearly heard the commotion. He turned his head and saw this scene, causing him to be involuntarily stunned. How is this guy so strong? This won't do. I have to find the third prince. The young man's face turned pale, and he actually slipped away at the first moment, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Zhuowen glanced at Chun Hui and the other two indifferently. Then he came to Jia Nan's side. At this moment, Jia Nan sat on the ground with Gatha's help. He looked at Zhuowen excitedly and said, Brother Zhuowen, you are so powerful. I really didn't expect that even the people from the Alcade Sacred Dynasty couldn't do anything to you. Aren't you injured? Looking at the lively Jia Nan in front of him, Zhuowen's gaze turned strange. Jia Nan was only at the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm. The young man from before was at the Supreme Being realm. The latter's full attack wasn't something a cultivator from the Xuanzuan realm could withstand. However, Jia Nan was still lively after being attacked several times. It was as if he wasn't injured at all. If it wasn't for the shocking bloodstains on Jia Nan's clothes, Zhuowen would almost believe that he wasn't injured at all. I'm fine. My body has been resistant since I was young. I don't know why. Maybe my skin is too thick. Jia Nan scratched his head and said embarrassedly. Zhuowen checked Jia Nan's meridians. He found that other than some light injuries, there were no signs of serious injuries. Moreover, Zhuowen also found that the light injuries on Jia Nan's body seemed to be healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. What a strong recovery ability. This recovery ability is much stronger than mine with the Nether King's heart. Zhuowen thought to himself. Kid, Jia Nan's armor soul is extraordinary. Kid, you have to build a good relationship with this kid in the future. After entering the Divine Academy, this kid will be of great help to you. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Xiao Hei, do you know something? Zhuowen asked curiously. Chapter 955. Yuanxing Undying Armor Soul? Zhuowen was shocked. Zhuowen had heard about the Undying Armor Soul before. It was said that this armor soul was formless and intangible. Even if one's cultivation had advanced to the fourth venerable realm, the armor soul would not materialize. However, the power of this armor soul was one of the best among all armor souls. As long as the cultivator did not die, the Undying Armor Soul would release a strong recovery power, allowing the cultivator's injuries to heal in a short time. It could be said that the cultivator with the Undying Armor Soul was like a cockroach that could not be killed. No matter how strong the attack was, as long as the attack did not annihilate the cultivator would not die. It was said that as the cultivator's cultivation level increased, the power of the Undying Armor Soul would also become more and more abnormal. For example, a broken arm could be regrown. Even if the cultivator's physical body and nascent soul were destroyed, as long as there was a drop of blood, the cultivator could still be revived with this drop of blood. However, the revival time would be very long. Therefore, in the history of the Heavenly Armor continent, The cultivators with the undying armor soul would usually divide their blood essence into many parts and hide them in extremely secret places. If they were unlucky and died, they would be completely immortal with the help of the undying armor soul. In a sense, the undying armor soul was more precious and rare than a ninth-grade dragon soul. Moreover, it was also a kind of abnormal armor soul that many experts were afraid of. Zhuowen did not expect Jianan, who came from the far west, to have the undying armor soul. It was no wonder that he could cultivate to the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm at such a young age despite his humble background. This boy's talent could not be underestimated. Then, Zhuowen's gaze fell on Gatha, who was beside Jianan. Gatha's talent seemed to be stronger than Jianan's. However, this girl did not have any combat experience. When Jianan was fighting just now, she only stood aside in a panic. Zhuowen could faintly feel that these two siblings were extraordinary. Perhaps they would achieve great things in the future. This was especially true for Kanan. If he did not fall midway, he would definitely be a monstrous existence when he grew up. You've got guts. You actually dared to touch the people of our Yaoguang holy dynasty. Today I'll kill you. A thunderous voice rang out, and then two figures suddenly rushed over from the other side of the deck. One of them was the young man who had fled just now, and the other was no stranger to Zhuowen. It was actually the third prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty, Yuansheng. It's actually the third prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty, Yuansheng. That brat is actually from the Yaoguang holy dynasty. He's simply courting death. An uproar broke out all around. Yuansheng's roar naturally attracted everyone's attention. Only then did everyone realize that Chen Hui and the other two were actually from the Alcade sacred dynasty. Many people had heard of the Yaoguang holy dynasty, so they looked at Zhuowen and the other two with pity in their eyes. Your Highness, this little bastard actually dared to bully me. You have to uphold justice for me. Moreover, just now, he even said that our Yaoguang holy dynasty is nothing. He doesn't put us in his eyes at all. It's really hateful. As soon as Yuansheng arrived, Chen Hui quickly grabbed Yuansheng's right arm and acted coquettishly. Her words were directed at Zhuowen. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Not long after Yuansheng's arrival, three more figures rushed over. These three figures were middle-aged men, who were over 50 years old. The aura on their bodies was extremely vast. They were all heavenly venerables. At this moment, the three of them knelt on one knee on the ground and said respectfully, Your Highness, this person looks down on everyone and despises the dignity of the Yaoguang holy dynasty. Let us teach him a good lesson. Yuansheng waved his hand and raised his chin. He looked down at Zhuowen and said arrogantly, He's just an ant at the middle stage of the venerable realm. There's no need for the three of you to take action. After saying that, Yuansheng slowly walked towards Zhuowen and said indifferently, Killing is not allowed in the Skyen sailboat, so you're lucky to have met this prince here. I won't kill you. I'll only cut off one of your arms. In the future, you'll remember that there are some people you can't afford to provoke. It's obviously that bitch behind you, who provoked Brother Zhuo first. Brother Zhuo was just defending himself. How can you twist the truth and cut off Brother Zhuo's arm? Isn't your Yaoguang holy dynasty a little too despicable? Jianan's face turned red and he couldn't help but shout angrily. Where did this little bastard come from? How dare you boast shamelessly in front of this prince? I think you're courting death. Yuansheng's eyes turned cold, and he pressed his right hand against the void. Terrifying origin energy condensed into a huge palm and pressed down on Jianan. At this moment, Jianan's injuries had yet to heal. Moreover, Yuansheng's cultivation was at the early golden venerable realm, which was 2 realms higher than him. The difference in their strength was too great. Jianan couldn't resist this attack at all. Boom! A terrifying fire of the sun gushed out from Zhuowen's body and turned into a huge fire python. It instantly entangled the origin energy palm in the sky. With a twist, the origin energy palm was completely annihilated. You're indeed the third prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty. You're even able to bully the weak without losing your face, Zhuowen said indifferently. However, Yuansheng's face darkened and he snorted coldly. You have a sharp tongue. After I've dealt with you, the 3 of you will be punished accordingly. Having said that, Yuanqing stomped his foot, and the aura of the early golden venerable realm gushed out. It was as though a vast origin energy ocean had formed around his body. At the same time, Yuanqing flicked his right hand, and a golden scepter appeared in his palm. There was a crystal-clear gem embedded at the top of the scepter. The scepter's aura was surging, and there was a royal aura. It was obvious that the scepter was a royal spiritual treasure, and its aura was vast and mighty. Yuanqing was enveloped in golden light, and he looked like an emperor who was revered by tens of thousands of people. Many people felt ashamed of their inferiority. In the golden light, Yuanqing looked down at Zhuowen and said in a majestic voice, "Because of my benevolence, I've only chosen to cut off one of your arms. Of course, if you kneel down and cut off one of your arms, I'm willing to forgive your sins." Many people looked at Yuanqing, who was enveloped in golden light, and there was a hint of surprise in their eyes. Obviously, the scepter in Yuanqing's hand was not an ordinary royal spiritual treasure. The power it exuded was vast and mighty. In addition to Yuanqing's golden venerable realm cultivation, ordinary golden venerables might not be a match for Yuanqing. Is it so great to have a royal spiritual treasure? A mocking smile appeared on Zhuo Wen's face. He stomped his foot, and an endless amount of fire of the sun shot out. Then, a blazing sun slowly rose behind him. If one looked carefully, it was not a blazing sun but a furnace enveloped in sun fire. The surface of the furnace was engraved with sun runes, and its power was not inferior to the scepter in Yuanqing's hand. An ant like you actually has a royal spiritual treasure? Yuanqing's eyes narrowed, and he was surprised. However, he still said with contempt, "But an ant will always be an ant. You're only at the intermediate stage of the sovereign realm. Do you think you can resist me with a royal spiritual treasure? Soon, I'll let you know that your reliance is nothing but an illusion, because it's futile in front of powerful strength." Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "Are you done? I still haven't seen you display any powerful strength, but I can see that your eloquence is unparalleled." Yuanqing's face stiffened and he snorted coldly. "You'll regret what you just said. I've decided to break your arms and let you repent." As he spoke, he formed a seal with his right hand and shouted, "Golden dragon curse, come out and destroy." Suddenly, a dragon's roar resounded. Then, the golden light around Yuanqing turned into a huge golden dragon. It swooped down and swept towards Zhuowen, wanting to tear Zhuowen into pieces. 3 suns. Zhuowen was not to be outdone. Endless flames of the great sun gushed out and condensed into 3 dazzling blazing suns above his head. The 3 blazing suns rose and then fell, blasting toward the golden dragon. Rumble! The golden dragon and the suns collided, and then a violent explosion resounded. The blazing sun's light and the golden dragon's light intersected, causing many cultivators on the deck to narrow their eyes. Whoosh! At the moment when the golden dragon and the suns were in a deadlock, a figure swept out, passed through the explosion, and rushed towards Yuanqing. It was Zhuowen with the blood spear in his hand. "You're courting death." Yuanqing's eyes turned cold. He waved the scepter in his hand, and a blazing golden light gushed out, turning into a golden rain that enveloped Zhuowen. Azura blood spear. In midair, Zhuowen twisted his waist, and his entire body started to spin like a spiral. The space around him split open, and a sea of blood gushed out, transforming into a blood-colored whirlpool that wrapped around Zhuowen's body. Bang! 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 The golden rain fell and bombarded the blood vortex around Zhuowen, causing a slight pitter-patter sound. Zhuowen passed through the golden rain without any obstruction and rushed towards Yuanqing. Yuanqing's eyes narrowed, revealing a trace of seriousness. He formed a seal with his right hand again, and the golden light changed again, turning into a monstrous golden hurricane that swept towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's lips curled. 3 pairs of lightning wings suddenly sprouted from his back. Then, the lightning wings spread out, and his speed soared to the extreme. He forcibly bypassed the golden hurricane, avoiding the golden hurricane's trajectory in a strange arc, and arrived in front of Yuanqing in an instant. At this moment, Yuanqing's face finally changed. He did not expect Zhuowen to have so many tricks up his sleeve. Whoosh! The blood spear shuttled through the void and swept over in an instant. The tip of the spear emitted a demonic blood-red color. Yuanqing's scepter landed on the ground, and a golden light gushed out from it, turning into a thick golden barrier in front of him. Ding! The blood spear collided with the golden barrier, and the sound of metal clashing resounded. Then it stopped in front of the golden barrier as if time had stopped. It seems that this prince has underestimated you. However, you're overestimating yourself if you want to attack this prince with such tricks. Looking at Zhuowen, who was blocked outside the golden barrier, Yuanqing's lips were filled with a mocking smile. Do you really think that's all I have? Chapter 956. Emperor's auracracks spread out on the surface of the golden barrier. In the end, it completely shattered into countless golden lights. Subsequently, a blood spear shot out from the countless golden lights like a thread piercing through flowers. Puchi! A stream of blood violently spurted out. Subsequently, an arm holding a golden scepter soared into the sky while dripping with blood. After tumbling a few times in the air, it landed on the ground. Rumble! The sound of the scepter hitting the ground resounded, completely attracting the attention of countless people in the surrounding area. When everyone's gaze landed on the golden scepter that was still rolling on the ground, as well as the arm that was holding it, the surrounding atmosphere suddenly became deathly silent. Ah! A miserable howl instantly resounded. Yuansheng, who was floating in the air, finally felt the pain in his right arm. He stretched out his left hand and touched his left arm. Only then did he realize that his right arm had been chopped off. Yuansheng held his right arm and continuously retreated. Both of his eyes were scarlet red. In front of everyone's eyes, his right arm had been chopped off. This was a great humiliation. Swoosh! As Yuansheng was retreating, a piercing sound swept over. Subsequently, an expressionless Zhuowen arrived in front of Yuansheng. The force of his right palm shot out towards Yuansheng. Bastard, you actually dared to chop off my arm! Yuansheng furiously roared. Ignoring the injury on his right arm, his left palm shot out in an attempt to block Zhuowen's attack. Because of my benevolence, I only cut off one of your arms. Otherwise, that spear earlier would not have pierced your right arm. Instead, it would have pierced your heart, Zhuowen coldly mocked. Hearing these words, Yuansheng almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Wasn't this the boast he had made earlier? Now that Zhuowen had purposely mentioned it, it was simply a ruthless slap to his face. Boom! The two palms collided again. Unfortunately, Yuansheng had lost an arm, and his qi and blood were not strong enough. It was impossible for him to block Zhuowen's palm. Spitting out another mouthful of blood, Yuansheng fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. The strong impact almost made Yuansheng faint. Whoosh! Just as Yuansheng was about to stand up, Zhuowen was already standing in front of him. Zhuowen ruthlessly stomped on his chest, causing the former to groan and fall to the ground again. Everyone's eyes narrowed as they watched this scene. As the third prince of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty, Yuansheng was extremely talented, and his cultivation level was at the initial stage of the Golden Venerate realm. However, he was now being trampled on. Moreover, this person's age and cultivation were lower than Yuansheng's. Originally, this battle should have been without suspense. However, the result now was beyond everyone's expectations. Yuansheng was defeated, and he lost miserably. I say, third prince of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, you just said that I am an ant that is not worth mentioning. Now, you are being trampled on by the ant that you said. How do you feel? Zhuowen asked calmly. As soon as these words came out, a mocking look appeared in the eyes of many people. Yuansheng was incomparably overbearing, and did not put Zhuowen in his eyes at all. But now Zhuowen, who he did not put in his eyes, was stepping on his chest in a victorious manner. Such a turn of events made him feel ashamed. Chun Hui, who had a sneer on her face, froze at this moment. It was replaced by a look of disbelief. The invincible third prince in her heart was being trampled on the ground in such a humiliating manner. She could not believe it at all. Even Jianan and Gatha were stunned. Originally, they did not think that Zhuowen would be a match for Yuansheng. But now they had to believe that Zhuowen was indeed very strong. After regaining their senses, the two of them stared at Zhuowen's figure. Light flickered in their eyes, revealing a touch of excitement. Yuanqing's eyes were full of humiliation. He roared, "Let go of this prince immediately, or I will make you die miserably." "You want me to die miserably? You are like a stray dog now. How can you make me die miserably?" Zhuowen said indifferently. Boom, boom, boom. 3 terrifying auras suddenly gushed out. Immediately, the 3 heavenly masters of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, who were not far away, attacked at the same time, rushing towards Zhuowen. "Little bastard, how dare you do such a thing to the 3rd prince? You are courting death." In an instant, the 3 heavenly masters formed a triangle and surrounded Zhuowen. Their terrifying auras firmly locked onto Zhuowen. "Despicable! Your Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's 3rd prince is not a match for Brother Zhua. You 3 elders actually joined hands to deal with Brother Zhua. Don't you have any sense of shame?" Jianan was extremely angry. He roared and wanted to rush towards Zhuowen. However, he was stopped by Zhuowen. "Jianan, don't be impulsive. I am fine." Jianan stopped and said worriedly, "But the 3 of them are heavenly masters." Jianan did not finish his words, but Zhuowen knew what he wanted to say. Zhuowen was only at the sovereign realm, while the 3 middle-aged men were heavenly masters. Although Zhuowen had shown great strength in defeating Yuansheng, the gap between their realms was too big. Zhuowen could not be a match for the 3 of them. After all, the difference between the Venerate realm and the Heavenly Venerate realm was 2 whole realms. The difference in strength was bound to be huge. Although Zhuowen had defeated a Yuan sage cleanly, that Yuan sage was merely a golden Venerate powerhouse. "Little bastard, quickly release the 3rd prince, or else your end will be extremely miserable." The 3 Empyrean powerhouses surrounded Zhuowen, their eyes full of threat. Zhuowen slowly got up and raised his right hand, lifting Yuansheng in the palm of his hand, as if he was lifting a chick. At the same time, a seal appeared on his right hand. It was a communication seal that could be used to contact Xiang Tianzuan and the other 4. The 3 heavenly masters of the Yaoguang Sacred Dynasty changed their faces, and their eyes were filled with coldness. This lad was too audacious. He actually dared to lift the prince of the Yaoguang Sacred Dynasty in such a humiliating manner. This lad deserved to die. "What? You want to fight? You should know that your 3rd prince is still in my hands. If the 3 of you dare to fight, this lad will definitely die," Zhuowen said indifferently. The faces of the 3 heavenly venerates stiffened. They stopped in midair and stared at Zhuowen with flickering eyes. They were really afraid that Zhuowen would kill Yuansheng in a suicidal manner. The surrounding people were in an uproar as they stared at Zhuowen in surprise. At the same time, they were trying to guess the origin of Zhuowen. He didn't give the Yaoguang Sacred Dynasty any face. Wasn't he afraid of the Yaoguang Sacred Dynasty's revenge? "Oh, Yuansheng, you are really in a sorry state. How could you be reduced to such a sorry state by a mere venerate? I wonder if your father will punish you if he sees you humiliating him here?" A dark and cold voice was transmitted over. Immediately, 3 people walked out from the crowd at the side. The person at the front was wearing a long blue robe. There was a huge blue whale picture on his long robe. It looked extremely lifelike and lifelike. "Blue smoke. You bastard, this lad isn't ordinary. If you fight him, you won't be any better than me." Yuanqing's gaze was extremely cold. He didn't struggle as he was being held by Zhuowen. Instead, he looked very calm. "Blue smoke from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. This blue smoke is a noble descendant of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. His talent is extremely high, and he's much stronger than most of the princes of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. He's famous in the entire Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. He's actually on the Heaven's Edge sailboat. The Heaven's Edge sailboat's first stop is the Outer Court of Fine Divinity Institute. I'm afraid many of the top geniuses of the Eastern lands will rush there to participate in the exam. This blue smoke and Yuansheng should be here for that. The mysterious youth who defeated Yuansheng should be here as well. His background shouldn't be low. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to look down on the Brilliance Holy Dynasty." After Yuansheng mentioned Blue Smoke's name, many people in the surroundings whispered, and they instantly revealed Blue Smoke's background. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. Another genius from the Holy Dynasty had appeared. Moreover, this Blue Smoke's aura was much stronger than Yuansheng's. He had probably reached the peak of the golden venerable realm. No wonder this blue smoke looked down on Yuansheng. Yuansheng's gaze was dark as he stared at Zhuowen. He said coldly, "Put me down, then kneel and kowtow to me 3 times and 9 times. Become my slave, and I'll spare your dog life." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. This Yuansheng was now in his hands, yet he still dared to talk nonsense. Was there something wrong with his head? "Don't you know your current situation?" Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Yuansheng smiled strangely and said, "Your strength is not bad. You're obviously only at the mid-stage of the venerable realm, but your combat strength is comparable to a golden venerable. Moreover, you're much stronger than an ordinary golden venerable. You're a genius. Originally, I wanted to keep you by my side and make you my most loyal slave, but now, you've completely lost that opportunity. So you're finished." As soon as Yuansheng said that, a sense of foreboding rose in Zhuowen's heart. Then, an extremely powerful force surged out of Yuansheng's body. This force contained the majestic emperor's qi. An illusory star rushed out of Yuansheng's body and swept towards Zhuowen. The power of an emperor? Zhuowen's face changed drastically. He quickly let go of Yuansheng's right hand and stepped back. Unfortunately, this illusory star was like a maggot that stuck to Zhuowen's bones. It wouldn't stop until it completely annihilated Zhuowen. Azura blood spear. Zhuowen roared furiously. Then, an endless sea of blood enveloped him and blocked in front of him, turning into a blood-red barrier. Crack. Unfortunately, the blood-red barrier was useless in front of the illusory star. It collapsed and shattered into countless blood-red powder. Zhuowen's eyes were extremely cold. He didn't expect that Yuansheng actually had the power of an emperor hidden in his body. Although this power of an emperor was very little, it wasn't something that an ordinary venerable could resist. Yuansheng fell to the side, and his face was slightly pale. He took out a jade bottle from his spiritual ring, removed the stopper, and poured it on the wound on his severed right arm. TSS, TSS, TSS. A subtle sound rang out. Shortly after, Yuansheng let out a low groan. Then his severed right arm grew back. Picking up the golden scepter, Yuansheng waved his right hand. The illusory star didn't chase after Zhuowen, but returned to Yuansheng's body. This illusory star was a strand of power that his emperor father had left in his body. Every time he used it, it would decrease a little. He wouldn't waste it on Zhuowen. After all, the outer courtyard exam of Jiaxin Academy was filled with danger. This thing had to be saved for that time. Chapter 957. Blue Smoke. Yuansheng was in a bad mood. That wisp of Emperor Force was his final trump card. Once it was unleashed, even a heavenly master would be put in a difficult position. He had reserved this trump card for the outer court assessment. Now that he had used it in advance, it had been seen by Blue Smoke and many others. When the time came for the outer court assessment, many people who had seen his trump card would be on guard. Then, he would lose the element of surprise. All of this was caused by Zhuowen. Therefore, Yuansheng now had the intention to kill Zhuowen. The 3 heavenly masters nodded respectfully and looked at Zhuowen with a grim smile. Because Yuansheng was in Zhuowen's hands, the 3 heavenly masters were afraid to make a move. That kind of feeling was quite sullen. Now that Yuansheng was out of danger, they could attack without any scruples. This kid in front of them dared to threaten 3 dignified heavenly masters. He was simply courting death. Swoosh, swoosh. The 3 heavenly masters turned into 3 phantoms and rushed towards Zhuowen from 3 blind spots, blocking all of Zhuowen's escape routes. "Brother Zhuo, be careful!" Jianan and Gatha exclaimed at the same time. Their eyes were filled with resentment. The people of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty were too despicable. Not only did they fight with people of the same generation, but now that Yuansheng was defeated, they actually sent 3 heavenly masters to deal with him. The surrounding onlookers also revealed mocking expressions. Zhuowen's performance was indeed eye-catching, but there was no suspense at all for a mere middle-stage sovereign to face the joint forces of 3 heavenly sovereigns. What an unlucky kid. Blue Smoke crossed his arms and looked like he was watching a good show. He naturally didn't think that Zhuowen could withstand the joint attack of 3 heavenly masters. "Kid, are you regretting your rude behavior just now?" If you had obediently listened to His Majesty's arrangement and become his servant, you might still have a chance to live. But now you're finished. In an instant, the three heavenly masters were already close to him. One of the heavenly masters sneered, revealing a row of white teeth. It looked extremely frightening. However, Zhuowen stood where he was calmly. There was no fear on his face. The terrifying aura emitted by the three heavenly venerates created a gust of wind that blew at Zhuowen's messy hair. Finished? Maybe not. An indifferent voice sounded. Then, three figures suddenly shot out from behind Zhuowen. They moved as fast as lightning and protected Zhuowen. Boom boom. The three heavenly masters, who was attacking Zhuowen, felt their palms were blocked by a powerful force. They heavenly masters and heavenly masters. Of the three heavenly masters. Heavenly masters. What's going on? It only took a blink of an eye for the three heavenly masters to retreat. Many people didn't even see what had happened. The three heavenly masters of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty were forced to retreat. When everyone's eyes focused on Zhuowen again, they saw five figures with strong auras standing in front of Zhuowen. They were Ziyang Tianzuan and the other four heavenly masters. When Zhuowen mentioned Yuansheng, he had already informed Ziyang Tianzuan and the others to come to the deck through the mark on his hand. When Ziyang Tianzuan and the others arrived, the three heavenly masters had joined forces to besiege Zhuowen. The three heavenly masters were White Brow Holy Master, Sunset Moon Holy Master, and Yellow Jade Holy Master. Greetings, Master. The five heavenly masters stood in front of Zhuowen. They turned around and bowed respectfully to Zhuowen. Everyone who saw this was shocked. It was normal for a genius to have the protection of an Empyrean powerhouse. But the relationship between a genius and an Empyrean powerhouse was unequal. Very few Empyreans would be willing to become the servant of a weaker martial artist. That was because the status of a servant was completely unequal. If the master wanted the servant to die, the servant had to die. This was a huge restriction on the status of a servant. Although the three heavenly masters of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty were quite respectful to Yuansheng, it was also because of Yuansheng's identity and background. They were still equal in status. But now, these five celestial lords who had appeared out of nowhere were actually respectfully addressing Zhuowen as their master without any complaints. This had really caused everyone's jaws to drop. Could it be that this young man's background was really extraordinary? He actually had five celestial lords as his servants. Blue Smoke, who was standing in front of the crowd, narrowed his eyes. He was quite surprised that Zhuowen actually had five heavenly master servants. A wisp of light flashed across his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Yuansheng was also stunned. Obviously, he had not expected such a situation to happen. The young man, who was just an ant in his eyes, actually had five heavenly master servants. Jianan and Gatha were also stunned. When they first met Zhuowen, they had noticed that Ziyang Tianzuan and the other four were extraordinary. However, they did not expect that all five of them were heavenly masters. Moreover, they were also important servants of Zhuowen. What is Brother Zhuo's identity? He has five heavenly master servants. This kind of treatment is not much worse than Yuansheng's. Jianan and Gatha looked at each other and revealed a look of shock. They did not expect that Zhuowen actually had such a powerful force behind him. He even had the protection of five heavenly masters. Yuansheng, it seems that you have kicked an iron plate. However, I think that our third prince of the Yaoguang holy dynasty had one of his arms chopped off in front of everyone. I don't think our third prince will be able to swallow such humiliation, right? If we don't get back at him, our Yaoguang holy dynasty will become a joke. Blue Smoke spoke again. However, this time, his words vaguely poked Yuansheng's sore spot, causing Yuansheng's face to turn extremely ugly. Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. Blue Smoke's purpose was obviously to provoke a fight between him and Yuansheng. Blue Smoke, have you said enough? If you say another word, don't blame me for attacking you, Yuansheng said coldly. Blue Smoke's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he said with a smile, Yuansheng, why do you have to vent your anger on me? Isn't it that brat who made you like this? What's the use of getting angry at me? Or are you, Yuansheng, afraid and want to retreat? Shut your dog mouth. Do I need you to tell me what to do? Yuanqing said coldly to Blue Smoke. Then, he glared fiercely at Zhuowen and said, You're just a coward who relies on the strength of 5 celestial masters. If my 2 uncles didn't take my eldest brother and second brother to Jiaxing first, the 5 celestial masters would just be a joke. You said that I'm a coward, who only knows how to hide behind the celestial masters. Then how good are you? You can't defeat me. But you sent 3 celestial masters to encircle me. Do you think that's a glorious thing? Zhuowen sneered coldly. However, his heart was filled with vigilance. The foundation of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty was very deep. From the words of the Yuan sage just now, it could be inferred that the Yuan sage had 2 elder brothers who were much stronger than him. Moreover, the 2 uncles he mentioned, Zhuowen suspected that they were 2 Emperor realm experts. After all, the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's foundation was much stronger than the Qing Xian Empire and Yin Xian Empire. It was impossible for there to be only 1 Emperor realm expert. Yuanqing's eyes were cold, and he said, Humph! Don't let me see you again during the outer courtyard assessment, or I'll make you die a horrible death. After saying that, Yuanqing left the deck with the 3 celestial masters and returned to the special cabin. Obviously, he was at a disadvantage in the confrontation with Zhuowen, and he couldn't regain his face. Naturally, he didn't want to stay on the deck any longer. The foundation of these holy dynasties is really extraordinary. The medicine that Yuanqing used to regrow his severed arm is probably not ordinary. Your Qing Xian Empire has never seen such a miraculous thing. Xiao Hei's voice resounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen rolled his eyes at her, but he didn't say anything. Yuanqing really had a lot of trump cards, especially that monarch qi. It was especially terrifying. Zhuowen discovered that Yuanqing's monarch qi was much stronger than Emperor Qing's. It probably wasn't something that a low-level Emperor realm expert could possess. It was very likely that it was the monarch qi of a mid-level Emperor realm expert. However, Yuanqing obviously cherished that strand of monarch qi. After using it to escape from Zhuowen's hand, he immediately kept it. Obviously, the monarch qi should be used up, and Yuanqing didn't want to waste it. Originally, Yuanqing thought that the 3 celestial masters would be enough to kill Zhuowen. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Zhuowen still had 5 celestial masters behind him. Many cultivators on the deck pointed at Zhuowen, their eyes filled with fear. A person who could have 5 celestial masters as his servants must have a powerful background. Therefore, they were naturally foolish enough to provoke Zhuowen. Ding ding ding. The crisp sound of footsteps could be heard, startling Zhuowen out of his thoughts. Lifting his head slightly, Zhuowen saw a smiling young face. Zhuowen wasn't unfamiliar with this face. It was actually Blue Smoke, who had provoked Yuanqing with his words just now. Blue Smoke's face was filled with a warm smile. He walked naturally to Zhuowen, as if they were old friends. Just now, he had been inciting Yuanqing to kill Zhuowen. Hypocrite! Zhuowen secretly defined Blue Smoke in his heart. This Blue Smoke was definitely a shrewd person, so Zhuowen was still very wary of him. What's the matter? Zhuowen asked coldly. Blue Smoke's footsteps stiffened, but he soon calmly stood in front of Zhuowen, cupped his fists and said with a smile, I really didn't expect this brother's strength to be so great. You even have 5 celestial master servants following behind you. I'm afraid this brother's background isn't simple, right? This one is Blue Smoke, the son of a marquis of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty. May I know this brother's name, and which holy dynasty you come from? After all, you don't look familiar to me, Blue Smoke said with a smile. Zhuowen's eyes were indifferent as he said, I'm just a wandering cloud and a wild crane. This one's background can't compare to Sir Blue Smoke's. Of course, my strength is also far inferior, so there's no need to mention me. After saying that, Zhuowen didn't wait for Blue Smoke to speak and walked past him. He had no intention of continuing the conversation with Blue Smoke. Chapter 958. Discussion. The deck of the World's Edge sailboat was very large. Although the battle between Zhuowen and Yuanqing had caused quite a stir, only the cultivators on the deck knew about it. Moreover, most of the people on the World's Edge sailboat this time were geniuses, who were participating in the outer court assessment of Fine God Academy. Geniuses were usually proud and arrogant, and it was common for them to prove their strength through battles. Therefore, the commotion caused by the battle between Zhuowen and Yuansheng gradually died down after everyone discussed it for a while. Young master, this person is so rude. He dares to look down on you just because he has 5 heavenly venerables? Doesn't he know that 5 heavenly venerables are nothing in front of our Blue Whale Holy Dynasty? The 2 heavenly venerables behind blue smoke revealed a trace of anger when they saw Zhuowen's rude behavior. Blue Smoke shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter. I'm just curious about this kid's background. Not to mention the 5 heavenly venerables behind him. Just the fact that he can make an early golden venerate Yuansheng look so miserable. This kid is definitely not simple. This kid's battle strength is indeed extraordinary, but compared to young master, he's still lacking. After all, if you were to fight with Yuansheng, you would only need a few moves to defeat Yuansheng." The 2 heavenly venerables flattered. The corners of Blue Smoke's mouth rose slightly, and he said indifferently, "Of course. My opponents are merely the top geniuses of the 7 major forces. Although this kid is not bad, he's still not qualified to be my opponent." The 2 heavenly venerables nodded. Blue Smoke's talent in the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty was obvious to all. With his lowly status as the son of a noble, he faced difficulties step by step, suppressing many princes and chasing after the Holy Dynasty's crown prince. What kind of glory was that? Let's go. Whether he's a dragon or a snake, we can only prove it in the outer court assessment. Blue Smoke silently glanced at Zhuowen's back, then left the deck with the 2 heavenly venerables. At this moment, Zhuowen had already left the deck with Ziyang Tianzuan and arrived at the northern part of the deck. There were fewer people there, and it was quieter. The 2 little fellows, Jianan and Jiasha, followed behind Zhuowen. Their eyes were filled with admiration. Zhuowen's performance just now was too shocking. The Yaoguang Holy Dynasty's 3rd prince, Yuansheng, had come aggressively to denounce and provoke Zhuowen. But not only did he fail, but Zhuowen's heavenly venerables, he had even lost. The 3 great heavenly venerates of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty wanted to bully the weak, but had never expected that Zhuowen would have 5 great heavenly venerates behind him. The Yuan sage was once again defeated. "Brother Zhuo, I didn't expect you to be so strong. You have 5 heavenly venerables protecting you. The force behind you must be very powerful, right?" Kanan asked excitedly. A wisp of a bitter smile appeared on Zhuo Wenlu's face as he gazed at Jianan's excited and clear eyes. Jianan is really naive. He actually casually asked such private questions. However, Zhuowen also knew that this was Kanan's nature, so he didn't mind too much. Instead, he smiled and said, "You can understand it that way. But this time, the outer court recruitment of Excellent God Academy doesn't depend on how strong the force behind you is, but on your own strength and potential." It was too troublesome to explain the origins of Ziyang Tianzuan and the other heavenly venerables, so Zhuowen didn't plan to go into detail. He just wanted Kanan and Gatha to think that the 5 heavenly venerables were sent by the force behind him to protect him. I must enter Excellent God Academy this time. Once I succeed, I will return to the far west with my sister to revive our family." Kanan nodded and said proudly, "Revive our family?" Zhuowen nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He also wanted to revive his family. Fortunately, he had arranged for the Zhuo family members to stay in the Azure Dragon Hall. The Azure Dragon Hall was surrounded by the Azure Dragon's source energy. The source energy was extremely beneficial to a warrior's cultivation. In addition, the Zhuo family was a descendant of the Ryuka from 10,000 years ago. Perhaps they could use the Azure Dragon source energy to awaken their own dragon soul. Zhuowen was very clear about the strength of a dragon soul. Even if it was a low-level dragon soul, the power it could display was much stronger than an ordinary armor soul. If many members of the Zhuo family awakened their dragon soul, their strength would increase greatly. After staying on the deck for a while, Kanan and Gatha wanted to go back to rest, so Zhuowen had Ziyang Tianzuan and the other heavenly venerables accompany them back to the 3rd-class cabin. He remained on the deck, silently looking at the terrible weather outside. "Brother Zhuo, I didn't expect you to come to the deck for a breath of fresh air. What a coincidence. A familiar voice sounded. Zhuowen turned his head and saw Emo Lingtian walking towards him with a smile on his face. What a coincidence! Zhuowen nodded and said with a faint smile. Emo Lingtian came to Zhuowen's side and followed Zhuowen's gaze. He also noticed the spectacular weather above the bitter sea and said, "Just now, Lingtian heard that a young man fought with Yuanxing on the deck and actually cut off one of Yuanxing's arms." Yuanxing of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was flustered and exasperated. He actually sent 3 heavenly venerables to deal with that young man. However, that young man actually had 5 heavenly venerables as his servants, causing Yuanxing to return in defeat. Emo Lingtian looked at Zhuowen with a smile. In fact, when he heard the rumor, he suspected that the young man who fought with Yuanxing should be Zhuowen. After all, Zhuowen also had 5 heavenly venerables as his guards. Zhuowen nodded and said indifferently, "It was Yuanxing and the others who provoked me first. They deserve to be humiliated." Emo Lingtian's heart trembled. The young man in the rumor was indeed Zhuowen. Yuanxing was an early-stage golden venerable genius, and a genius of the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty. His combat strength was definitely more terrifying than ordinary golden venerables. However, Zhuowen still managed to cut off one of his arms. Obviously Zhuowen, whose cultivation was only at the mid-stage of the venerable realm, was even more terrifying. Emo Lingtian could do the same as a supreme venerate. However, Emo Lingtian knew that if he did not pay a certain price, it would be impossible for him to win against an early-stage golden venerate martialist. If Emo Lingtian were to fight with Yuanxing, he knew that he wouldn't be a match for Yuanxing. After all, they were both geniuses, and their combat strength couldn't be measured by cultivation alone. Emo Lingtian's cultivation was only at the peak of the venerable realm, which was weaker than Yuanxing. However, Zhuowen was able to cut off one of Yuanxing's arms. Even Emo Lingtian was shocked. Brother Zhua is indeed extraordinary. Defeating a golden venerable while at the venerable realm is something only the top geniuses of the Holy Dynasty can do. However, Brother Zhua isn't any worse than those top geniuses. Emo Lingtian sighed. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Actually, it's just a fluke." Emo Lingtian took a deep look at Zhuowen. He knew that Zhuowen didn't want to talk about this topic, so he didn't mention it again. "Brother Emo, you are a prince of the Yin Xian dynasty. Do you know the details of the outer courtyard examination of the Jiaoshan Academy?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. Emo Lingtian was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, "Jiaoshan Academy doesn't recruit students at a fixed time. As for the specific examination, it's different every time. I remember that the last time they recruited students was more than 10 years ago. Although the assessment is different every year, the format has never changed. There are 3 stages to the outer courtyard's assessment. The first stage is the basic stage. This basic stage has never changed. It tests bone age, cultivation base, and aptitude." Hearing that, Zhuowen was immediately interested and asked, "It actually tests bone age, cultivation, and aptitude. Are there any special requirements for these 3 aspects?" Of course there are. The minimum requirement to enter the outer courtyard is that you must be under 25 years old and have a cultivation of the Xuanzuan realm. In the past, there was no lack of cultivators who came to take advantage of the situation. Although these cultivators were strong, they would still be rejected by the Jiaoshan Academy. Emo Lingtian nodded and said. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. It seemed that the selection process of the Jiaoshan Academy was quite principled. However, it was also true. A cultivator's potential would explode at the age of 25. If they were nurtured well during this period, their future would be limitless. However, after the age of 25, their potential had already been set. Even if they had a high cultivation, their future achievements wouldn't be too high. The Jiaoshan Academy obviously didn't want to waste time on such old cultivators. This was also why most of the cultivators who came to the Jiaoshan Academy to participate in the examination were young cultivators. Moreover, all of them were geniuses. After all, to be able to reach the cultivation of the Xuanzuan realm before the age of 25, there weren't many geniuses in the Xian dynasty who were able to do so. Those who were able to do so were basically heaven-sent geniuses. and these heaven-sent geniuses in the Xian dynasty had become the minimum requirement for the Jiaxin Academy's enrollment. It could be seen how harsh the Jiaxin Academy's enrollment requirements were. As for aptitude, it's actually a cultivator's potential. The higher the aptitude, the greater the potential. This thing is originally an illusory thing, and is simply hard to define. However, for a cultivator to reach the cultivation of the Xuanzuan realm before the age of 25, their aptitude wouldn't be bad. Therefore, this test is rather useless in the basic mode. Mo Lingtian continued. Zhuowen nodded and continued to ask, Brother Mo, what are the 2 levels after the basic mode? Mo Lingtian's mouth was full of bitterness as he said, the last 2 levels of the test are the outer court's secret. Moreover, every time there's an enrollment it will change. As for what kind of test it is, it's impossible for us to know. After all, if we knew the contents of the last 2 tests, as long as we came prepared, our chances of passing the test would greatly increase. The Jiaxin Academy wouldn't let this happen. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes flashed with a trace of disappointment. However, he also understood that the last 2 tests were the most important criteria for the Jiaxin Academy's outer court enrollment. Only those who performed well in the last 2 tests would have a chance of entering the outer court. Chapter 959. Arriving at Jiaxin Island in the boundless sea of bitterness, terrifying black waves rolled and soared into the sky. It was as if there was a huge black dragon hidden in the sea of bitterness, roaring and tossing on the surface of the sea from time to time. It was a magnificent scene. Whoosh! A huge sailboat broke through the countless black waves like a bolt of lightning, passing through the countless waves and sweeping into the distance. On the other side of the sea of bitterness, a vast piece of land was faintly discernible in the black waves. It seemed so close yet so far away. When the boundless sailboat gradually approached the piece of land, many cultivators on the deck also started to notice the faintly discernible piece of land in the distance. When the sailboat was 10 miles away from the piece of land, many cultivators on the deck realized that the piece of land was actually an island. It was just that the island was too huge. If they didn't observe it closely, they wouldn't have realized that it was just a huge island floating in the sea of bitterness. Is the outer courtyard of the Jiaxin Academy on this island? Many cultivators couldn't help muttering as they stared at the huge island before them. The Jiaxin Academy was an extremely mysterious existence to the cultivators of the eastern lands on the other side of the Sea of Bitterness. The 9 Netherworld realm was even more mysterious and illusory. It was rumored that the 9 Netherworld realm existed in the deepest part of the Sea of Bitterness. However, the Sea of Bitterness was boundless with no end in sight. Even the boundless sailboat in the desolate ancient city might not be able to reach the end of the Sea of Bitterness. In other words, it was unrealistic to rely on oneself to find the 9 Netherworld realm. If outsiders wanted to enter the 9 Netherworld realm, they would have to be led by someone from the 9 Netherworld realm. Outsiders wouldn't be able to find the entrance to the 9 Netherworld realm. Jian Mu, who had relied on his own strength to cross the Sea of Bitterness, should be a cultivator from the 9 Netherworld realm. Crossing the Sea of Bitterness meant returning to the 9 Netherworld realm alone. Other than having a cultivator from the 9 Netherworld realm lead the way, there was another method, which was to enter the 9 Netherworld realm through the outer courtyard of the Jiaxin Academy. This could be considered as a shortcut to enter the 9 Netherworld realm. At this moment, the Flame Emperor, Zhuowen, and the other geniuses of the Yanxian Empire were gathered on the deck. Their gazes were all looking at the huge island before them, with hope in their eyes. They were about to arrive at the Divine Institute. This was the thought in the hearts of many martial artists. Who would have thought that the Divine College would be located on an island? Also, this bitter sea is really huge, as far as the eye can see. 5 Elements Sex K2 said casually. The Sea of Bitterness is boundless, and no one knows how big it is. Moreover, in this huge Sea of Bitterness, there isn't just this one island in front of us. There are many other islands. This boundless sailboat can carry tens of thousands of people. Not all of them will go to the island of Fine God Academy, but some will go to other islands. The Flame Emperor explained faintly, which piqued the curiosity of Zhuowen and the rest. They did not expect that there was more than one island in the Sea of Misery. It seemed that the Sea of Misery was not as simple as they had imagined. Zhuowen nodded in agreement. In the 3 days that he had been in the third-class cabin, he had seen many older martial artists. There were even some martial artists who were carrying some specialties and items from the outside world. The goal of these martial artists was definitely not the Divine College, but the other islands. Perhaps they were bringing the items from the outside world to the other islands to trade for things like spirit stones. After all, the outside world was much bigger than the Sea of Misery, and there were many different types of items. Looking at the Bitter Sea, it was a barren land, and there were not many martial artists. Naturally, it was not as rich as the outside world. If they were to sell the items on the other islands, the price would be several times higher. While Zhuowen's attention was on the island in front of them, a cold gaze was cast on Zhuowen, causing Zhuowen's gaze to freeze. He turned his head and met the gaze of the owner of the cold gaze. The owner of the gaze was no stranger to Zhuowen. It was the third prince of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty, Yuansheng, who had a conflict with Zhuowen 3 days ago. Seeing Zhuowen looking over, Yuansheng's gaze was cold, and he immediately turned his head away. Zhuowen's eyes flashed coldly. If this Yuansheng did not know what was good for him, and provoked him again, Zhuowen did not mind eliminating the source of trouble. Although the emperor's aura on Yuansheng's body was terrifying, it could only threaten ordinary heavenly masters. If Zhuowen was in his demon state, he would not be afraid of the emperor's aura at all. Whoosh! When the ship was 3 miles away from the island, a figure suddenly rushed out from the cabin below the ship. He stepped on the void and came to the deck, a pair of sharp eyes staring at the island in front of him. This person was about 40 years old, and he was dressed in coarse clothes. He looked ordinary, but the aura he exuded made many people tremble. This person was definitely a terrifying Emperor Realm Master. Drop the anchor. When the ship was 1 mile away from the island, the master floating above the deck finally spoke. Then with a wave of his sleeve, a terrifying yuan power surged out and turned into 8 huge palms. Like the tentacles of an octopus, they swept towards the ship in all directions. Clang! The sound of chains colliding rang out. Then, the 8 palms pulled out 8 huge anchors from the ship's surface. The 8 palms exerted force, and the 8 thick anchors were plunged into the water. Buzz! 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 A loud sound of friction rang out, and the boundless ship's speed gradually came to a stop. At this moment, they were only half a mile away from the island. On the shore of the island, there was already a group of people wearing the same uniform waiting. They were probably the people from the Fine God Academy who had come to receive the geniuses. Open the seal and lower the viaduct. The Emperor Realm Master in the air roared again. The purple halo above the deck faded, and a half-mile-long viaduct was formed in front of the ship. We have arrived at the Fine God Island. Our destination is the outer court of the Fine God Academy. Passengers may disembark. Remember, you must walk on the viaduct. Once these words were spoken, some of the young martial artists were already impatient. They did not follow the Emperor Realm Master's words, and directly flew towards the shore. Ah! Ah! Suddenly 3 screams rang out. The first 3 young martial artists who flew out seemed to be affected by a terrifying gravitational force the moment they stepped off the ship. One after another, they fell into the bitter sea. When they fell into the bitter sea, a terrifying corrosive force spread throughout their bodies, making them unable to resist. Their bodies were slowly corroded, from their feet to their bodies. Finally, they turned into a pool of black water. Hiss! Hiss! Gasps could be heard one after another. Originally, there were many cultivators at the back who thought it was troublesome and wanted to directly cross the sea of bitterness to reach the shore. But now, all of them stopped in their tracks, their legs trembling, and they didn't dare to take another step. The bitter sea is a cursed sea. Above the bitter sea, there is an extremely terrifying gravitational force. Martial artists below the Emperor Realm, who wish to fly above the bitter sea, are simply courting death. The Emperor Realm Master hovering above the deck glanced indifferently at the martial artists who had turned into 3 pools of black water. He slowly opened his mouth and continued. Even Emperor Realm Masters will not be able to hold on for long if they fall into the bitter sea. If you think you are strong enough, you can fly like the 3 people just now. There is no need to walk on the viaduct." As soon as these words were spoken, many people cursed in their hearts. 3 exalted realm cultivators had died for no reason. With such a precedent, how could they possibly treat their own lives as a joke? Hence, the martial artists on the deck followed the viaduct in an orderly manner and slowly walked down the shore. The Flame Emperor also brought Zhuan, Emo Lingtian and the rest. They blended in with the crowd, looking very ordinary. After all the martial artists on the deck had disembarked, the Emperor Realm Master on the deck shouted again and steered the boundless sailboat towards the other islands. Once the boundless sailboat left, everyone's gaze landed on the group of people wearing uniforms on the shore. They knew that this group of people should be the martial artists sent by the Divine Academy to receive them. However, what surprised everyone was that this group of 20 people were all at the Heavenly Venerate realm. The weakest was at the initial stage of the Heavenly Venerate realm, while the strongest was at the peak of the Heavenly Venerate realm. Moreover, these 20 people were not old. The average age was no more than 30 years old. They should be students from the Outer Academy. This group of people was led by a man and a woman. The man was cultured and elegant, and his actions were appropriate. The woman was charming and had good looks. They could be considered a perfect match. The man walked forward with a smile and said, "You must be the juniors who came from the outside world to participate in the Outer Academy assessment. My name is Chung Dong, and I'm likely to become the senior of many of you. This time the Outer Academy sent me to receive you. So it's Senior Chung Dong. When I was in the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty, I often heard of Senior Chung Dong's name. You are a genius on the Heavenly Venerate list." Chung Dong's eyes lit up. He stared at Yuanxing and said, "You are from the Yaoguang Holy Dynasty? How are Yuan Zhao and Yuan Kong related to you?" Yuanxing raised his eyebrows slightly and said with a smile, "They are my brothers. Yuan Zhao is my eldest brother, and Yuan Kong is my second brother. So that's how it is. Your eldest brother and second brother are very talented. In the test a few days ago, their results were very good, and they were crowned as monsters. It's worth mentioning that your eldest brother, Yuan Zhao, is very talented. I believe it won't be long before he can enter the Heavenly Venerate list," Chung Dong suddenly said with a smile. Eldest brother and second brother both passed the test? Yuanqing's face flushed red, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Many cultivators in the surroundings looked at them with envy. The Yaoguang Holy Dynasty was indeed worthy of being one of the 7 strongest forces in the outside world. Yuan Zhao and Yuan Kong's talents were actually praised by Chung Dong. Moreover, this Yuanqing's talent was also not weak. It was likely that he would also be able to enter the Outer Academy. Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's Blue Smoke greets Senior Chung Dong. Chapter 960. Arcane Heavenly Master. Oh, you're from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty? Your Blue Whale Holy Dynasty isn't bad either. The Blue Whale Crown Prince from a few days ago also performed well in the test. His talent isn't any weaker than Yuan Zhao's. You should perform well too. Chung Dong looked at Blue Smoke and smiled. The Crown Prince is the son of the Holy Dynasty's emperor. Blue Smoke can't compare to him. Being able to enter the outer court is already Blue Smoke's greatest satisfaction. Blue Smoke cupped his hands and said ambiguously. However, when Chung Dong mentioned the Blue Whale Crown Prince, Blue Smoke's eyes flashed with sharpness. Clearly, he was just being polite when he said that he couldn't compare to the Blue Whale Crown Prince. Chung Dong nodded. His gaze once again landed on the other 2 groups of people in the crowd. One of them was wearing a fiery red long robe, with a cluster of flames embroidered on their robes. Moreover, the strange thing was that the flames suddenly became like real flames. They continuously danced and burned, emitting a scorching heat. Many cultivators nearby couldn't stand the high temperature, and avoided this group of people. You're from the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty, right? Chung Dong asked with a smile. This group of people cupped their hands at Chung Dong. A young man with fiery red hair smiled and said, Senior Chung Dong really has sharp eyes. I'm Fenji from the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty. Chung Dong waved his hand and said with a smile, It's not that I have sharp eyes, but the symbol on your robes is too obvious. It's hard not to connect you to the burning flame holy dynasty. The group of people standing on the other side of the burning flame holy dynasty slowly walked out. This group of people was as thick as monsters, especially their arms, which were almost as thick as an ordinary person's thigh. Yuan Tong from the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty greets Senior Cheng Dong. A robust young man with dark skin cupped his hands at Cheng Dong and smiled. The smile on his face looked very simple and honest. Cheng Dong nodded and said meaningfully, "This class is really coincidental." The people of the 4 great sacred dynasties from the outside world came together. And yesterday, the disciples of the Myriad Sword Sect, Cold Moon Palace, and Yellow Mystic Sect also came together. Their sect doesn't want to be associated with our holy dynasty's people, so they chose to travel on a ship that was 1 shift earlier than ours. Yuan Tong shrugged helplessly. Cheng Dong nodded. Clearly, he was aware of the grudges between the 4 great sacred dynasties and the 3 great sects, so he didn't dwell on this topic. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Follow me to the outer courtyard. Once you're there, you can take the basic test." After saying that, Cheng Dong and the group of 20 people walked along the main road ahead. Behind them, nearly 1,000 cultivators looked at each other and followed behind Cheng Dong. Zhuowen glanced at the people of the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty and the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty. These 2 holy dynasties were extremely low-key, and when Cheng Dong mentioned the people of these 2 holy dynasties, he wasn't as close as he was to Yuanxing and Blue Smoke. Cheng Dong's different treatment made Zhuowen realize that the foundation of the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty and the Divine Arm Holy Dynasty should be ranked at the bottom of the 4 great sacred dynasties. Moreover, the more famous geniuses of these 2 holy dynasties were only Yuan Tong and Finji. They weren't like the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and the Alcate Holy Dynasty. However, even so, Yuan Tong and Finji's cultivation were very strong. At the very least, they were at the Golden Venerable Realm. Moreover, the foundation of a holy dynasty like this was usually extremely rich. They probably had extremely powerful trump cards on them, making them much more difficult to deal with than ordinary cultivators. This island is called Excellent God Island. I think everyone has heard of this name before. It's named after our Excellent God Academy. Cheng Dong walked in front and introduced the Excellent God Island to the many cultivators behind him in a clear voice. Moreover, from his appearance, it seemed that he was very proud of being able to become a member of the Excellent God Academy. There was a trace of pride between his brows from time to time. Of course, it wasn't just Cheng Dong. The other 20 students of the Excellent God Academy, who came with Cheng Dong, had proud expressions on their faces. They weren't any weaker than Cheng Dong's. The Excellent God Island is 100,000 miles wide. There are countless peaks and mountain ranges. Moreover, what's even rarer is that there is a huge Yuan vein on this Excellent God Island. The cultivation speed in the Excellent God Academy is several times faster than the outside world. All of this is because of the Yuan vein on the island. Cheng Dong continued his introduction. Yuan vein? I didn't expect that the Excellent God Island would contain a Yuan vein. No wonder the geniuses who entered the Excellent God Academy all have terrifying strength and monstrous battle prowess after learning something. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. He naturally knew about Yuan veins. Yuan veins contained extremely pure Yuan qi. This pure Yuan qi didn't need to be overly refined by cultivators and could be directly transformed into Yuan qi. Generally, when cultivators absorbed the Yuan qi of heaven and earth, they would need to undergo refinement before they could transform it into Yuan qi. Therefore, cultivators would need to spend a large amount of time to refine the impurities in the Yuan qi of heaven and earth. Only then would they feel at ease transforming the Yuan qi into Yuan qi and storing it in their dantian. However, the pure Yuan qi within the Yuan vein didn't have any impurities. Cultivators didn't need to spend too much time refining the Yuan qi within the Yuan vein. They could directly absorb the Yuan qi and refine it into Yuan qi. Without a doubt, cultivators who relied on the Yuan vein to cultivate would have a much faster cultivation speed. This was also a shortcut to increasing one's cultivation in a short period of time. Looking at the amazed expressions of the people behind him, the corners of Cheng Dong's mouth curled up. He was naturally very satisfied with everyone's reaction. Our excellent God Academy's outer court is located in a city in the center of the island. Of course, there are other cities on the excellent God Island, but they aren't as strong as our excellent God Academy. As Cheng Dong spoke, he led everyone to soar into the sky. He pointed to the center of the island and continued, "That city is the main city of the excellent God Academy." Everyone looked over. What entered their eyes was a huge city that was as terrifying as a giant beast. The surface of the city was emitting a milky white light. The milky white light was like a steaming fog. It floated in the air and formed a funnel-like white cyclone. Everyone was very familiar with the milky white light. It was the Yuan Qi. Only extremely pure Yuan Qi would emit a milky white light. It was very obvious that within the main city of the excellent God Academy, there was a huge Yuan vein. The milky white Yuan Qi was extracted from the Yuan vein. Other than the huge city in the center, there were other cities in the surroundings of the main city of the excellent God Academy. There were many cities of different sizes scattered around the area. In the process of passing through these cities, you have to be careful at all times. You have to reveal your identity as a student of the excellent God Academy. Otherwise, you will be easily attacked by them. Now follow me closely. If you lose track of me, you will be killed by the warriors in the nearby cities. Cheng Dong cautioned them. He floated in the air and flew forward at a constant speed. Everyone behind felt a chill in their hearts. It seemed that the excellent God Island wasn't as safe as they had imagined. If they couldn't reveal their identity as a student of the excellent God Academy, they would be killed as a foreign species. Follow closely. The Flame Emperor reminded Zhuowen, Emo Lingtian and the others. The group silently followed behind the large group. Sure enough, when the group flew past a nearby city, a group of warriors rushed out from the city and stared at them vigilantly. However, these people quickly saw that Cheng Dong and the others were wearing the uniform of the excellent God Academy. They didn't make a move. Moreover, the warriors in these cities were very strong. Although there weren't any Emperor Realm experts, there were quite a few golden exalts and heavenly exalts. Most of the people who came to take the test were from the Xuanzun realm. There weren't many supreme exalted geniuses. As for golden exalts, there were probably only geniuses from the 4 great sacred dynasties. There weren't any heavenly exalts among the 1,000 people. This excellent God Island is really mysterious. There are so many experts. Kanan and Gatha followed beside Zhuowen. Kanan couldn't help but murmur in excitement. After 3 days of interaction, Zhuowen naturally recognized Kanan and Gatha's character. In addition, it was very likely that Kanan had the undying armor soul. Therefore, Zhuowen wanted to befriend Kanan and Gatha. Therefore, the 2 siblings were quite dependent on Zhuowen. Moreover, the 2 siblings knew that Zhuowen came from the Qing Xian Empire. Although the Qing Xian Empire was much stronger than the Far West land, it was still lacking compared to the 4 great holy empires and the 3 great sections. As long as you enter the excellent God Academy, you can also reach that height, or even stronger, Zhuowen said with a smile. I will. Kanan raised his fist and nodded. Whoosh. After a while, Cheng Dong led the group and landed in the main city of the excellent God Academy. As soon as they stepped into the main city, everyone was pleasantly surprised to find that the Yuan Qi here was dozens of times denser than other places on the excellent God Island. There should be a powerful arcanist in the outer courtyard who set up such a Yuan Qi gathering array. It can gather most of the Yuan Qi in the underground Yuan vein, in the main city, for the students of the excellent God Academy to cultivate. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Zhuowen nodded. He was, after all, a grade 5 great perfection arcanist. Naturally, he could feel the strong spiritual fluctuations in the primary gathering array. The spiritual fluctuations were even stronger than Elder Shiwan's. It was likely that the arcanist who set up the primary gathering array had a stronger spiritual power than Elder Shiwan. Elder Shiwan was a complete grade 6 arcanist. An arcanist who was stronger than the former could only be a legendary grade 7 arcanist. If the arcanist who set up this Yuan Qi gathering array is really a grade 7 arcanist, then it's really amazing. This is more terrifying than an ordinary Emperor Realm expert. Moreover, grade 7 arcanists have another title, which is Arcanist Heavenly Master. In a sense, the grade 7 Yuan Qi gathering array set up by Arcanist Heavenly Master is a terrifying formation that is comparable to a demonic weapon. Xiao Hei's voice became serious. It was obvious that the Arcanist Heavenly Master he mentioned should be an extremely powerful existence. Chapter 961. Blood Drop Test. The crowd landed in an extremely spacious square. At this moment, the square was filled with a sea of people, and was filled with noise. Moreover, they realized that most of the people in the square were young warriors. Obviously, the warriors in the square were basically geniuses from other regions who had come to participate in the entrance test. Although Chengdong's arrival with nearly 1,000 people attracted a lot of attention, the area of the square was too big, enough to accommodate tens of thousands of people. Compared to the 1,000 people Chengdong had brought, it was like a small child in the presence of an adult. Therefore, the crowd in the square only glanced at the crowd behind Chengdong before they quickly retracted their gazes and hurriedly lined up to take the test. The family members, elders, or servants of the warriors who are taking the test, please wait there. You are not allowed to approach the test area without permission. After landing in the square, Chengdong pointed to the empty space on the other side of the square and spoke to the crowd behind him. At this moment, there were many older warriors standing on the empty space. They were probably the warriors who had accompanied the warriors who were taking the test. Zhuowen turned around and said to Ziyang Tianzuan and the other 4 who were standing respectfully behind him, "The 5 of you can go to the empty space and wait there first." When Ziyang Tianzuan and the other 4 heard this, they nodded and walked straight to the empty space. The other people who had accompanied the warriors in the group also left. Among them, Yan Di gave some instructions to the crowd and did not stay for long. The group of nearly 1,000 people had shrunk by 2/3, leaving only about 300 people. Follow me to the registration area in front of the square. However, there will be a basic test waiting for you there. Of course, if anyone wants to fish in troubled waters, I think they should give up on that idea as soon as possible. Chengdong glanced at the crowd, then waved his sleeves and led the crowd to the front of the square. At the end of the square there were many counters. Behind each counter stood an expressionless young man in a long black robe. On each counter, there was a palm-sized blood-colored crystal. No one knew what it was for. Chengdong led everyone to the back of one of the counters. This counter also had the fewest number of people in line. However, this was relative. Zhuowen estimated that there were at least 800 to 900 people in front of this line. Including the 300 new members that joined them, there were almost 1,200 people in line. There are so many people. Zhuowen frowned and muttered in a low voice. This is very normal. After all, the Divine Institute's reputation in the outside world is too great. Moreover, the Eastern lands is vast and there are countless warriors. Every time the Divine Institute recruits students, the scene would be similar. Mo Lingtian, who was standing beside Zhuowen, laughed softly. Xian Xing, K2, and Zui Qingfeng followed behind Mo Lingtian. After all, Mo Lingtian was the true number 1 among the younger generation of the Yanxian Empire. Although Zhuowen's strength wasn't much weaker than Mo Lingtian's, Zhuowen wasn't someone from the Yanxian Empire. Naturally, they couldn't completely trust Zhuowen. That's right. It'll be dark before it's our turn. Zhuowen shrugged and said without a care. A martial artist's cultivation was measured by months and years. To be able to become a genius martial artist, their patience was not bad. This kind of waiting would not make them feel too impatient. 23 years old, Xuanzuan Realm's early stage pass. 22 years old, Xuanzuan Realm's late stage pass. 22 years old, Sovereign Realm's early stage, not bad pass. 30 years old, Xuanzuan Realm's early stage. Uncle, you're already 25 years old, but you're only at the early stage of the Xuanzuan Realm's early stage. Don't you feel ashamed? You're not qualified, Scram. 23 years old, half step into the Swordsmanship realm. Brother, don't embarrass yourself with your cultivation. Scram. The examiner at the front was like the strictest judge, as he announced the results of the test. Naturally, there were people who were happy and people who were worried. In particular, some older martial artists who wanted to take advantage of the situation, or martial artists whose cultivation did not pass the test, were mercilessly exposed by the testers. This made them feel ashamed as they quickly left the square. What surprised Zhuowen was that there were quite a number of such people who wanted to take advantage of the situation. There was a tendency for them to take advantage of the situation, which annoyed the examiner to no end. Once, he even seriously injured one of the people who wanted to take advantage of the situation, as an example to others. As the team moved forward, it was Zhuowen's turn soon. These 300 people had all set off from the ancient barren city together. Although there were some people who wanted to take advantage of the situation, they were much fewer than the previous team. 22 years old, initial golden venerate realm. You're not bad, pass. Suddenly, the examiner at the front raised his voice and attracted the attention of many people. Even the warriors at the other counters noticed Zhuowen's team, and their eyes fell on the figure in front of them. Zhuowen was naturally familiar with this person. He was Yuansheng, the third prince of the Alcade sacred dynasty. He was able to reach the initial golden venerate realm at the age of 22. His talent was indeed extraordinary. The examiner's gaze softened. Yuansheng raised his chin high, obviously enjoying the attention from the surrounding people. Then, like a proud peacock, he walked towards the candidate selection hall behind the counter. Behind Yuansheng was Blue Smoke of the Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty. Blue Smoke still had a warm smile on his face. Under the guidance of the examiner, he cut his finger and dripped a drop of blood on the blood-red crystal. Whoosh! An extremely dazzling light gushed out. Then, the examiner looked at Blue Smoke in surprise and said loudly, "You're very good. 23 years old, late golden venerate realm pass." Whoosh! As soon as the examiner landed, many people in the surroundings looked over again. This team in front of them was somewhat extraordinary. It hadn't been long since the test started, and 2 golden venerate realm geniuses had already been tested. However, the shocking results were yet to come. Yuan Tong of the Divine Arm Sacred Dynasty and Fenji of the Burning Flame Sacred Dynasty were both in the golden venerate realm. Yuan Tong was in the middle golden venerate realm, while Fenji and Blue Smoke were in the late golden venerate realm. 4 golden venerate realm geniuses had appeared consecutively. The examiner at the counter couldn't help but smile from ear to ear. As for the other cultivators in the queue, they were all dumbfounded. They subconsciously thought that they were hallucinating. Those who had reached the Swordsmanship realm before the age of 25 could be crowned as geniuses. Supremes were peerless geniuses, golden venerates were monstrous geniuses, and heavenly venerates were monstrous geniuses. The outer court test had already started for 3 days. However, only the first day of the test had more monstrous geniuses. Among them, there were even monstrous geniuses. Today there were 4 of them, and all 4 of them were in the same team. The other examiners at the counter were filled with envy. The examiners at the counter also had benefits. The more geniuses they tested, the more benefits they would receive. The examiners at the counter in front of Zhuowen's team had tested 4 monstrous geniuses at once. After the test ended, the examiners would naturally give him a lot of benefits. That was why the other examiners were filled with envy. On the other hand, the other people in Zhuowen's team were much calmer. Yuansheng, Blue Smoke, and the other 3 were the top geniuses of the 4 great sacred dynasties. If they hadn't reached the golden venerate realm, they would have found it strange. The team moved forward at a moderate pace. Soon it was Zhuowen's turn. When it was Mo Lingtian's turn, the latter smiled and came to the counter to drip his blood for the test. 23 years old, peak supremes. Not bad, you pass. The examiner was in a good mood. He nodded at Mo Lingtian and allowed him to pass through the counter and enter the back. After that, Zui Qifeng, Xianxing and K2, who were behind Mo Lingtian, naturally passed the test as well. Sister, don't be afraid. It's just a drop of blood. When it was Jianan's turn, she first encouraged Gatha behind her. Then, she came to the counter and dripped her blood for the test. 19 years old, Middle Xuanzuan realm. You pass. After the examiner finished speaking, Jianan passed through the counter and came to the back. She stared at Gatha and Zhuowen with a smile on her face. Gatha was a little nervous. Her face was pale, and she didn't know what to do. However, a broad hand landed on Gatha's shoulder. Then Gatha saw a gentle smile. Gatha, don't be afraid. Your big brother and I are watching you, Zhuowen said gently. Hearing this, Gatha's heart calmed. She nodded firmly and said softly, Thank you, big brother Zhua. As she spoke, Gatha walked to the counter. She bit her thumb with her silver teeth and dripped a drop of blood. 18 years old, Middle Xuanzuan realm. You pass. The examiner looked at Gatha again. Reaching the Middle Xuanzuan realm at the age of 18. This little girl and the young man just now had great potential. After she finished speaking, Gatha passed through the counter and came to Jianan's side. The two siblings looked at Zhuowen's test results together. Next, the examiner looked at Zhuowen and said calmly. Zhuowen stepped forward and casually dripped a drop of blood. With his cultivation and age, there was no doubt that he would pass. Therefore, Zhuowen didn't seem to care. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. However, something strange happened. When Zhuowen's blood fell on the blood-colored crystal, the blood-colored crystal suddenly emitted a strange blood aura instead of light. This blood aura flowed through the wound on Zhuowen's thumb and surged into Zhuowen's body. Then, Zhuowen felt a warm power spread throughout his body. Buzz! The crimson crystal began to tremble violently. Zhuowen discovered that the energy surging out of the crimson crystal, faintly, had a trace of perfect compatibility with the demon path of massacre that he cultivated. It was actually able to strengthen the demon path of massacre. Feeling the throbbing of the demon path of massacre in his body, Zhuowen frowned and thought to himself, could this blood-red crystal be related to the demon path of massacre? The examiner at the counter panicked. He didn't know why this would happen to the blood-red crystal. This had never happened before. What did you do just now? After thinking about it, the examiner knew that it must be because of the young man in front of him. He couldn't help but ask. Crack. Chapter 962. Retesting crack. A clear shattering sound rang out from the counter. Soon after, the originally noisy surroundings immediately became silent. One could even hear a pin drop as everyone's gazes converged on the counter, where Zhuowen was located. The testing crystal had actually shattered. This was something that had never happened in the past few days of testing. Is there a problem with the testing crystal on the counter? Or is it because of this young man? After the silence, there was an uproar. Many people pointed at Zhuowen, who was standing in front of the counter, with strange gazes. Standing in the open space behind the counter, the cultivators who had passed the test also looked over. Among them, Yuanxing from the Alcade Holy Dynasty smirked, revealing a trace of mockery. Blue smoke from the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty narrowed his eyes. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. The others also had strange expressions on their faces. After all, this was the first time they had seen a testing crystal shattering. Jianan and Gatha, the two siblings, looked worried. They didn't know whether the result of the testing crystal shattering was good or bad. Zhuowen sank into deep thought. The blood-red crystal contained an extremely strong power of slaughter. This power of slaughter was extremely beneficial to his cultivation of the demonic path of slaughter. When his blood came into contact with the blood-red crystal, it resonated with the demonic massacre path in his body. In addition to the tyrannical style of the demonic massacre path, the slaughter energy in the crystal was directly absorbed by the demonic massacre path in his body. What is the origin of this crystal? Zhuowen wondered inwardly. Boom! A terrifying aura filled the air. Then, the tester standing in front of the counter stared coldly at Zhuowen and asked, Let me ask you, what did you do just now? How did you cause the blood crystal to shatter? A heavenly venerable? Zhuowen took several steps back and looked at the testing staff in front of the counter. His eyes revealed a trace of surprise. This divine academy was truly extraordinary. The testing staff they sent out was actually an Empyrean powerhouse. However, looking at the overbearing tester, Zhuowen said indifferently, I'm just following your instructions and dripping my essence and blood into this crimson crystal. As for why the crimson crystal shattered, what does that have to do with me? Perhaps there's a problem with its quality. Zhuowen naturally would not admit that the shattering of the blood crystal had something to do with him. After all, judging from the expression of the tester, the blood crystal should be very valuable. If he admitted it, the tester would definitely not let the matter rest. Hence, he could only use this as an excuse. The examiner narrowed his eyes and said coldly, This didn't happen when the others were tested. Why did it shatter when it was your turn? If it's not you, who else could it be? Seeing that the tester was unwilling to let him off, Zhuowen frowned and said, I really don't know anything about the blood crystal. What do you want? The tester sneered and said, The blood crystal is something that I painstakingly obtained from Azura Island. Its value is immeasurable. However, since you are a newcomer, I'll charge you 500,000 high-grade spirit stones. Hua. As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Obviously, no one thought that this tester would demand such an exorbitant price. A small blood crystal actually cost 500,000 high-grade spirit stones. Wasn't this robbery? Of course, many people's eyes were filled with ridicule. After all, the one to compensate wasn't them, but Zhuowen, who had shattered the blood crystal. What a pitiful kid! Yuancheng ridiculed from the open space behind the counter. Zhuowen's complexion turned unsightly. 500,000 high-grade spirit stones could buy a good quality emperor-level spiritual treasure. However, this tiny blood crystal could be compared to an emperor-level spiritual treasure. Zhuowen knew that the tester was probably asking for an exorbitant price to extort him. Wu Sheng, I still have a blood crystal here. Why don't you use it first? Maybe there really was a problem with the blood crystal just now. Suddenly, a gentle and warm voice was heard. Soon after, Cheng Dong had unknowingly arrived in front of the counter where Zhuowen was at. A similar blood crystal lay on his palm. So it's Senior Cheng Dong. However, this blood crystal was obtained by you. How could I dare to take it? The tester named Wu Sheng quickly waved his hand and said. Cheng Dong shook his head and said, Your blood crystal is broken, but the test will continue. Also, this little brother is a newcomer to the academy. Blood crystals have always been extremely hard. I'm afraid that your blood crystal might really be an accident. Hearing Cheng Dong's words, Wu Sheng could only agree. He took Cheng Dong's blood crystal and coldly stared at Zhuowen. Continue the test. If this blood crystal breaks again, you won't be able to explain yourself, even if you have 100 mouths. Thank you so much, Senior Cheng Dong. Zhuowen cupped his hands at Cheng Dong, but the latter waved his hand and laughed. There's no need for that. After all, I was the one who brought you here. I can't just ignore it and be irresponsible. Zhuowen nodded. He had a good impression of Cheng Dong. This person was upright just and not weak. Therefore, Zhuowen secretly remembered this favor. You're already calling me senior brother. Do you really think that you'll be able to enter the academy? Wu Sheng said indifferently. Zhuowen glanced at Wu Sheng indifferently and said, You don't have to worry about that. Let's start the test now. Wu Sheng's expression was slightly sluggish. He looked at Zhuowen's indifferent attitude and said coldly, Humph. Right now, they were filled with self-satisfaction and wanted to proceed to the next stage of the test. However, Cheng Dong had actually said that they would have to wait for 7 days before proceeding to the second stage of the test. In other words, they would have to wait for another 4 days. Seeing the disappointment on the faces of many cultivators, the corners of Cheng Dong's mouth curled up slightly as he continued. 4 days shouldn't be too long for you. You can wait here in the candidate area for 4 days. When the 7 days are up, we will gather all the qualified cultivators together. At that time, we will divide them into groups. Everyone nodded. They knew that this was the rule set by the Divine Academy's recruitment. After all, the outer court wasn't recruiting just 1 or 2 people. They were recruiting from the entire Eastern continent. Even if those who came were the top geniuses of various forces, the Eastern continent was vast. Forces were like bamboo shoots after a spring rain, and their numbers were numerous. Every force had sent a few geniuses to come. Many a little makes an ocean. And the number was terrifying. Fortunately, cultivators had excellent patience. Although there were a few who complained, the majority of the cultivators sat down cross-legged in the empty space after their disappointment. They wanted to use these 4 days to train and raise their own cultivation so that they could prepare for the next test. Chung Dong said a few more words before leaving the place. He walked towards the testing plaza. After all, the test was still in progress, and he couldn't leave for too long. There are really many cultivators participating in the test this time. I'm afraid there are more than 100,000, right? Mo Lingtian said with a smile as he sat beside Zhuowen. Zhuowen didn't mind. He nodded and said, "However, I'm afraid that more than 2/3 of the foundational tests will be eliminated. There should only be about 30,000 people who can enter the second stage of the test. The elimination rate for the second and third stages is even more terrifying. At that time, the number of people who can enter the outer court will be very few." Mo Lingtian nodded in agreement and said, "The Divine Academy pursues the path of the elite. Just being a genius isn't enough. You must be a genius among geniuses to be able to stand out from the rest and enter the inner court. However, I think that with Brother Zhuo's strength and potential, entering the Divine Academy shouldn't be too much of a problem, right?" Mo Lingtian asked with deep meaning. Chapter 963. Hujia, Brother Zhuo, you must be joking. I don't have such confidence. After all, even Brother Zhuowen can't guarantee that he will be able to enter Jiaxin Academy. Naturally, I can't guarantee it either, Mo Lingtian said with a smile. We only need to do our best. Whether or not we can enter the academy isn't something we can do just because we want to. After Zhuowen finished speaking, he sat cross-legged on the ground and entered a meditative state. Mo Lingtian's eyes flickered. Now he couldn't see through Zhuowen. Whether it was the rumor about the Qing Xian Empire's Zhuowen that the Flame Emperor had mentioned, or the fact that Zhuowen had chopped off one of Yuanqing's arms on the deck of the boundless sailboat, or the shattering of the blood crystal during Zhuowen's test. All of these revealed that the young man in front of him wasn't simple, and was even more mysterious. However, it was precisely because of Zhuowen's mysteriousness that made Mo Lingtian want to remove the fog that was covering Zhuowen's body and see the truth. Jianan and Gatha sat silently beside Zhuowen, and also sat cross-legged on the ground. The two of them were now following Zhuowen's lead. Regardless of whether it was Zhuowen's strength or Zhuowen's attitude towards them, they felt at ease, and even a little dependent on him. Time flew by like a white steed flitting by a crack. 4 days passed very quickly. During these 4 days, the testing square was filled with a sea of people. There was an endless stream of young warriors who came to take the test. So much so that the huge square almost couldn't fit them all. Although there were more and more warriors who came to take the test, there were fewer and fewer warriors who could pass. Most of them were people who took advantage of the situation. When the first ray of sunlight shone through the clouds in the morning, a cool morning breeze blew past, bringing a refreshing feeling. The 7 days of foundational testing had finally come to an end. The originally noisy testing plaza had finally become much quieter than before. Those warriors who didn't pass the test were basically brought out of the main city by the people of Divine Academy. They were prepared to send them back. Even if those warriors who didn't pass were unwilling, it was useless. Under the strict orders of Divine Academy, they could only leave the main city unwillingly. In the open space, Zhuowen and the other cultivators opened their eyes one after another, revealing a wisp of light. They slowly stood up, and then their gazes all fell on the other side of the square, where a figure was slowly walking over. Senior Chung Dong. Everyone stared at this figure excitedly. This person was the gentle-looking Chung Dong. Everyone knew that Chung Dong's arrival was very likely to bring them to participate in the second stage of the test, so everyone's eyes were filled with hope. The corners of Chung Dong's mouth curled up slightly, and he said, "There are more than 10,000 of you here. Come with me. I'll bring you to the location of the second stage of the test. There are 2 other batches of geniuses waiting there." 2 other batches? Zhuowen and Mo Lingtian looked at each other, seeing the doubt in each other's eyes. It seemed that this batch of warriors wasn't the only batch participating in the test. There were actually two batches of people. One batch had close to 10,000 people. Then wouldn't three batches of people be 30,000? This was a terrifying number. You don't have to be so puzzled. There isn't only one testing plaza. There are two other testing plazas in the main city. It's just that I'm in charge of this one. Chung Dong explained with a faint smile. Only then did everyone feel relieved. Back then, they were directly brought to this plaza by Chung Dong. They hadn't wandered around the main city, so they naturally didn't know that there were two other testing plazas in the main city. Now you can summon those who are related to you, and follow me to the location of the second stage of the test. After Chung Dong finished speaking, the nearly 10,000 warriors in the open space brought their respective people to their sides. The Flame Emperor, Xiang Tianzuan, and the rest also came to the side of Zhuowen, Emo Lingtian, and the other geniuses from the Yinxian Empire. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Everyone brought their respective people. Nearly 10,000 people followed behind Chung Dong in a mighty manner. I wonder what the second stage of the test will be like. Jianan clenched his fists and said excitedly. Not only Jianan, but the expressions of the nearly 10,000 people were similar. Whether they were snakes or dragons, whether they could enter the outer yard, depended on the remaining two stages of the test. However, Zui Qingfeng was a little worried. This time, there are peerless geniuses from the Xuanzuan realm, the Sovereign Realm, the Golden Sovereign Realm, and even the Heavenly Sovereign Realm participating in the test. If they are all tested together, wouldn't those with lower cultivation be at a disadvantage? As soon as he said that, Zhuowen, Emo Lingtian, and the rest nodded their heads. Zui Qingfeng was right. The cultivation of these geniuses was different. It would be fine if they met those with lower cultivation, but if they met those with higher cultivation, it would be disastrous. The Flame Emperor frowned and shook his head. I'm not sure, but the Divine Academy doesn't focus on cultivation. Instead, they focus on talent and potential. I don't think their test will be unfair. Swoosh, swoosh. Soon, the nearly 10,000 people under Chung Dong's lead arrived at a huge cliff. The cliff was nearly 10,000 feet high, and its surface was as smooth as a mirror. This huge cliff was located in the northwest region of the main city. At the bottom of the cliff, there was a large open space. At this moment, there was already a group of figures standing on the open space. This group of figures was faintly divided into two groups. If one were to count them carefully, there were at least 20,000 of them. This group of figures should be the geniuses that Chung Dong had mentioned. They should be the geniuses that had been selected from the other two test grounds in the main city. The sound of something breaking through the air resounded, attracting the attention of the nearly 20,000 cultivators on the open space. Soon after, Chung Dong led the nearly 10,000 people behind him and landed in an open space in the open space. Chung Dong, you're a little late. We've been waiting here for half an incense stick's time. As soon as Chung Dong landed, a beautiful figure slowly walked over from one of the groups in the open space and spoke in a somewhat reproachful tone. This beautiful figure was a woman dressed in sexy clothes. Her slender waist swayed gently, and as she walked, there was a seductive and enchanting feeling. Her plump breasts were slightly opened, revealing an alluring curve. Many people in the open space looked at the enchanting woman who was walking over, their eyes filled with intoxication. Although the woman in front of them was not a peerless beauty, she was definitely worth looking at, especially the faintly discernible charm that she revealed, which was always able to firmly attract everyone's attention. This woman knew how to display her charm. It could be said that she was definitely a stunner. Seeing the enchanting woman walking over, Chung Dong's gaze froze, and he immediately said gloomily, Hu Jia, there's still half an incense stick of time before the second stage of the test begins. You guys came so early, didn't you have to wait? Now you're blaming me for being late. Humph. If you're late, then you're late. Why are you still looking for excuses? Hu Jia curled her lips, her rosy cherry lips pouting. It actually had a different kind of seduction, leaving many geniuses behind Chung Dong dumbstruck with amazement. But Chung Dong was somewhat speechless. But Hu Jia was this kind of personality, so Cheng Dong did not care about this either. Instead, his gaze was placed on the open space. Hu Jia's group said, "Looking at your appearance, your mood is pretty good. Could it be that the testing plaza you guys are in has a few good seedlings?" The corners of Hu Jia's mouth curled up slightly, both eyes curved into crescent moons, and he said, "There are indeed a few pretty good seedlings. The top genius disciples of the 3 major sects outside all came to the testing plaza that I'm in to take the test. Especially the myriad sword sect's monstrous palm tree. He actually reached the initial stage Empyrean realm, and his age is merely 23 years old. There's also Cold Moon Palace's Shike and Yellow Mystic sects Huangxian, both at the peak of the Golden Exalt realm. These 3 people are considered the strongest in my group." Initial stage Empyrean realm? Cheng Dong's face slightly stiffened. He also did not expect that in the testing plaza, where Hu Jia was, there would actually be a peerless monster in the early stage of the Empyrean realm. "Looks like your group is comparable to Qi Ji's group?" Cheng Dong's gaze landed on another group of people without leaving a trace. The leader of that group of people had delicate features, slender limbs, and carried an ancient sword on his back. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and stood there like a sharp sword. This person was the person in charge of the other plaza, Qi Ji. Sword cultivator? Zhuowen, who was standing in the middle of the group, focused his gaze on Qi Ji, who was standing on the other side of the open space without saying a word. The aura on Qi Ji's body was very sharp. His entire person was like an unsheathed sharp sword. He had seen this aura from Jianmu in the desolate ancient city, but Qi Ji's sharp aura was completely inferior to Jianmu's. A person was like a sword, and a sword was like a person. His entire body emitted a sharp sword-like aura. This was a realm that only sword cultivators could reach. On the other hand, sword cultivators were good at attacking. They were able to defeat the strong as the weak and challenge the strong. Although they were not as terrifying as devil cultivators, they were much stronger than ordinary warriors. This Qi Ji's aura was even stronger than Hu Jia and Cheng Dong's. His strength was probably even above Cheng Dong and Hu Jia's. Hu Jia curled his lips and said somewhat unhappily, "It can only be said that Qi Ji's luck is too good. The Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's crown prince Yin Zhongyang, and the Alcade Holy Dynasty's Yuan Zhao and Yuan Kong, these 3 monstrous geniuses, have all gone to the testing plaza where he is." Cheng Dong nodded, a trace of gloominess in his eyes. Among the 2 groups of people that Qi Ji and Hu Jia were in charge of, there were peerless geniuses. Only the plaza that he was in charge of didn't have a single one. The strongest ones were the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's Blue Smoke and Burning Flame Holy Dynasty's Fenji, who were both in the late stage of Golden Venerable Realm. It could be said that the quality of the people he was in charge of was far inferior to the geniuses that Hu Jia and Qi Ji were in charge of. Thinking of this, the corner of Cheng Dong's mouth was filled with a bitter smile. "Cheng Dong, among the people you're in charge of, there should also be peerless geniuses, right? Introduce them to me." Hu Jia's beautiful eyes turned slightly, and immediately landed on the people behind Cheng Dong, and asked curiously. Qi Ji, who was standing on the other side of the open space, also cast his gaze towards Cheng Dong. He was also somewhat curious about the lineup of people that Cheng Dong was in charge of, and whether or not they could surpass the quality of his group. Cheng Dong's face stiffened, his eyes flickered, and he sighed. "Let's be honest. The quality of the people I'm in charge of is completely incomparable to you and Qi Ji. In the group I'm in charge of, the strongest and most talented should be Blue Smoke of the Blue Whale Holy Dynasty and Fenji of the Burning Flame Holy Dynasty. These 2 people's cultivations are in the late stage of Golden Venerable Realm." Chapter 964. Iron Man Cave. Hu Jia's beautiful eyes slightly narrowed. She did not expect that in the group of people that Cheng Dong was in charge of, the strongest was only at the late stage of the Golden Exalt realm. Qi Ji was also stunned for a moment. Then his gaze regained its coldness, and he no longer looked over. Without a doubt, among the 3 groups of people, only Cheng Dong's group was of the worst quality, and it was even more impossible for them to compete with the group he was in charge of. Chengdong, maybe you didn't observe carefully. There might be a peerless monster in your group, but that guy likes to hide his cultivation, so you didn't see through it. Wuxia didn't know what to say, and could only use this completely unreliable reason to comfort Chengdong. Of course, even she herself didn't believe this reason. The opportunity to enter Jiaxun Academy was so rare. How could there be anyone hiding their cultivation? Wasn't that just courting death? Chengdong smiled bitterly, but did not point it out. He only nodded and said, I hope so. Zhuowen, who was standing in the middle of the group, narrowed his eyes, because he realized that there were a few familiar faces in the group that Hu Jia was in charge of. The people from the Qingxian Empire really came, Zhuowen muttered to himself. In the group of people behind Hu Jia, 5 of them were recognized by Zhuowen at a glance. They were Gran Baihe, Zhu Bai, and Huangfu Wuji, Guosheng, and Morong Zhan respectively replaced Huangfu Wudao, Zhuowen, and Qing Yan's positions. Zhuowen only took a glance, then retracted his gaze, his face full of calmness. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Suddenly, sounds of breaking through the air came from behind the cliff in front of them. Soon after, they floated above the empty space. The auras of these 4 people were extremely strong, not at all weaker than Xiang Tianzuan. They were actually 4 peak Empyrean experts. The 4 of them were not young, around 40 or 50 years old. The skin on their faces was slightly wrinkled. Of course, with the lifespan and realm of martial warriors, these 4 people were definitely much older than they looked. Greetings to the 4 instructors. Chengdong, Hu Jia, and Qi Ji respectfully cupped their hands towards the 4 old men in the sky. The 4 elders nodded. Then, a tall and skinny elder stepped forward. He looked down at the people in the open space and said loudly, The 3 of you, divide these 30,000 people into 4 groups. They are the Mystique Sovereign Group, the Sovereign Group, the Golden Sovereign Group, and the Heavenly Sovereign Group. Yes, the 3 of them were startled at first. Soon after, they each went to the group they were in charge of and began to choose. Divide yourselves into 4 groups: Mystique Venerable, Supreme Venerable, Golden Venerable, and Heavenly Venerable. Qi Ji and Hu Jia each shouted to the people they were in charge of behind them. Then, the people they were in charge of started to stand in line. Chengdong, on the other hand, was a little helpless, because there were no Empyrean monsters in the group he was in charge of. He could only say weakly, You guys can divide yourselves into 3 groups: Mystique Venerable, Supreme Venerable, and Golden Venerable. Not long after, the 3 groups of people finished standing. Among the nearly 30,000 martial warriors, there were only 3 people who were able to reach the Empyrean realm before the age of 25. They were the Yaoguang Sacred Dynasty's Yuan Zhao, the Blue Whale Sacred Dynasty's Crown Prince Yun Zhongyang, and the Myriad Sword Sex Palm Tree. There weren't many Golden Venerable Realm cultivators, only a dozen or so of them. Compared to the 30,000 people, it could be said to be incomparably rare. Most of them were from the Xuanzuan realm and the Supreme Realm. Among them, the Xuanzuan realm accounted for 2/3 of them, and the rest were from the Supreme Realm. The quality of the students recruited this time is not bad. The 4 old men's sharp gazes fell on the 3 Empyrean geniuses, and there was a trace of satisfaction on their faces. In the past, it was already considered good if there was 1 Empyrean genius in the recruitment process. But this time, there were 3 of them. The 4 old men were naturally delighted. After all, if a cultivator who reached the Empyrean realm before the age of 25 was properly nurtured, advancing to the Emperor realm would not be a problem. Now, let's begin the second stage of the test. The second stage of the test is called the Iron Man Cave. The steep cliff behind me is the location of the test. The tall and thin old man pointed at the cliff behind him and said loudly. Everyone's eyes followed the old man's direction and shifted to the cliff. However, their eyes were filled with doubt. It was clearly an ordinary cliff, and there was no cave on it. The Iron Man Cave, as the name suggested, was definitely a cave. However, the cliff was as smooth as a mirror. How could there be a cave? However, the crowd's doubts didn't last long because the 4 old men floating in the air made hand seals at the same time. A terrifying aura surged out, and then a series of light talismans rushed toward the cliff in front of them like ropes. Gotcha! Suddenly, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the huge cliff, and then 4 huge caves that were hundreds of feet wide appeared on the surface of the cliff. Moreover, the crowd noticed that there was a sturdy figure standing at the entrance of each cave. Upon closer inspection, they weren't real people at all, but strange humanoid figures that were covered with countless iron plates. They were at least 10 feet tall, and looked very terrifying. These are the iron men guarding the caves. You have seen the 4 caves. From left to right, they are divided into 4 levels. The Swordsmanship realm, the Supreme realm, the Golden realm, and the Empyrean realm. You can choose a cave that matches your cultivation. Once you pass, you will pass the second stage of the test. There are many mechanisms in the Iron Man cave. Once you pass through the Iron Man cave and reach the entrance of the cave, you will pass the second stage of the test. You can continue to participate in the third stage of the test. Of course, there are also good opportunities in the Iron Man cave. There are armor techniques, spiritual treasures, spiritual herbs, spiritual stones, and other resources. If you have the ability to break through, you can obtain all of them. Treat them as a gift from the students. At this point, the skinny old man stopped and looked at the crowd quietly. As soon as he said that, everyone's eyes lit up with excitement. If what the skinny old man said was true, then the resources hidden in the Iron Man cave wouldn't be bad. In other words, if they were strong enough, they could obtain all the benefits in the cave. Senior, since the Iron Man cave is divided into 4 levels, does it mean that the things in each level are different? The Blue Whale Holy Dynasty's crown prince, Yun Zhongyang, suddenly stepped forward and asked. Yun Zhongyang was a young man whose eyes were filled with pride and arrogance. His body exuded a strong sense of confidence, which had reached the point of conceit. Compared to the arrogant Yun Zhongyang, the myriad sword sex palm tree was much more normal. His expression was calm, and his eyes revealed a hint of sharpness. On the other hand, the Alcade Holy Dynasty's crown prince, Yuan Zhao, had an ordinary appearance. His face was ordinary, and he was dressed in gray cotton clothes. He was the most inconspicuous of the 3. The skinny old man nodded approvingly and said, "You're right. Since the Iron Man cave is divided into 4 levels, it naturally goes from easy to difficult. Mystique Venerables are the easiest, and the resources inside are the worst. Heavenly Venerables are the hardest, and the resources inside are naturally the best." As expected, Zhuan thought inwardly. Since the Iron Man cave was divided into difficult and easy levels, the resources inside would naturally be divided into good and bad. Of course, if someone is confident in his cultivation, he can also challenge the Iron Man cave that is 1 level higher than him. However, there is only one chance. If he fails, he will be directly eliminated. Therefore, this old man advises everyone to know their own limits. Otherwise, you will miss the opportunity to enter the outer court. As soon as the old man said that, some cultivators who were eager to give it a try felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over them, and their hearts gradually cooled down. There was only one chance for this kind of challenge. If they tried to challenge the Iron Man cave that was higher than them and failed, they would be directly eliminated. For some cultivators with decent strength, it would be an extreme pity. I'll try the Sovereign Iron Man cave. Suddenly, a figure rushed out from the crowd and instantly rushed to the entrance of the second cave. This person was young, about 20 years old, and his cultivation had reached the peak of the Swordsmanship realm. He was probably coveting the resources behind the Sovereign Iron Man cave. Flood Dragon entering the sea. As soon as the young man came up, he used a powerful armor technique. Terrifying origin energy surged out and turned into a vast ocean around him. Then, a huge flood dragon descended from the sky and swooped down, pouncing on the sturdy Iron Man cave. The Iron Man cave slowly turned his head and stared at the flood dragon in silence. However, the huge axe on his shoulder chopped down with a sharp edge. Poochie! The huge flood dragon was chopped into pieces by the huge axe before it could even get close to the Iron Man cave. Then, the huge axe's momentum did not change, and it actually swept straight towards the young man. The young man was so shocked that he quickly used his armor spirit. Sizzle. The young man's armor soul was a huge python. Its scarlet tongue flickered in and out of its mouth, and its triangular eyes were extremely cold and sinister. However, the Iron Man Cave's huge axe still carried an indomitable momentum. He did not have any scruples about the terrifying python at all. As long as it was in his way, he would cut it down without exception. Poochie. What was shocking was that even though the young man had used his armor spirit was still unable to withstand a single blow. It was chopped into countless pieces by the huge axe, and countless blood rained down from the sky. The young man did not even let out a groan as he was chopped into two halves by the huge axe. There was no luck at all. Hiss! Hiss! Gasps could be heard. A genius at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm had died in front of everyone just like that. The Iron Man Cave did not show any mercy at all. Humph! Didn't this old man just say that we should act according to our strength? This person did not know his own strength, so he deserved to die. Of course, this old man also forgot to mention that the Iron Man Cave will not show any mercy. If you can't pass and are killed by him, you can only blame yourselves. Looking at the young man who had been beheaded, the thin and tall old man was expressionless as he explained unhurriedly. However, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Before the young man died, the thin and tall old man didn't explain it clearly. After the young man died in the hands of the Iron Man, he slowly explained it. Obviously, this was done deliberately by the old man. He was waiting for someone to stand out like the young man just now, so that he could make an example out of the others. Of course, if anyone is not confident, you can choose an Iron Man cave that is one level lower than you. It will be much safer that way, the old man suddenly added. However, most of the people present were proud geniuses who thought highly of themselves. How could they choose an Iron Man cave that was lower than them? Chapter 965. Gatha enters the stage. I'll give it a try. Suddenly Xian Xing, who was standing behind Emolingtian, tapped her foot on the ground. Her entire body was shrouded in starlight as she rushed towards the second cave. Xian Xing is in the initial stage of the sovereign realm. I wonder if she can pass the second cave? K2 and Zui Qingfeng whispered worriedly. The two of you can be at ease. Xian Xing is not as simple as you imagine, although her cultivation is only at the initial stage of the sovereign stage. In terms of battle prowess, by relying on the Myriad Star Hall's Myriad Star Codex, she is completely comparable to an intermediate stage sovereign. The corners of Emolingtian's mouth rose slightly as he spoke with a faint smile. Let's hope so. Zui Qingfeng and K2's eyes flickered as they nodded. Zhuowen, who was standing not far away, also looked at Xian Xing. He felt that Xian Xing's cultivation technique was similar to Luo Xing's in Muqing County's Jade Maiden Star Court. Could it be that the Myriad Star Palace of the Yanxian Empire was related to the Jade Maiden Star Court of the Qingxian Empire? Whoosh! In an instant, Xian Xing landed in front of the Iron Man. She stretched out her jade-like hand and released a terrifying burst of starlight towards the Iron Man. Creak! The Iron Man was expressionless as he waved his right hand. The huge axe in his hand blasted out like a hot knife through butter, smashing heavily on Xian Xing's starlight. Kacha! With just a single blow, Xian Xing's attack was shattered by the Iron Man. The huge axe's momentum didn't decrease at all. It continued to rush towards Xian Xing, trying to tear her apart. The huge axe was as thick as Xian Xing. If Xian Xing was hit by such a huge axe, she would definitely lose a layer of skin, even if she didn't die. Quite a few people started to shake their heads and sigh. They secretly thought that this beautiful woman would probably die in front of them. However, they were even more shocked because this Iron Man's strength was far beyond their imagination. For better or worse, Xian Xing was an early venerable realm martial artist. But his attack was actually useless in front of this Iron Man. It was broken in a single strike. This Iron Man's strength was likely comparable to a peak venerable realm martial artist. Moreover, this Iron Man's skin was thick and tough. Even a golden venerable realm martial artist would find it difficult to break through it. Starfall. Looking at the incoming gigantic axe, Xian Xing's countenance turned pale. Gritting her teeth, she waved her jade-like hands as an endless amount of astral light gushed forth from her body. After which, these astral light fell like meteors, forming a terrifying meteor shower in front of Xianxing. Boom. The huge axe rushed over and heavily smashed against the huge meteor shower curtain. The huge axe, which was like a hot knife through butter, seemed to have sunk into a swamp at this moment, as it completely froze in front of the meteor shower curtain. Starburst, the crisp sound of an oriole rang out once again. Then the huge meteor shower actually exploded. The terrifying explosive force filled the entire entrance of the cave. Thud thud thud. The metal giant was actually forced back 3 steps under the might of the explosion. Xianxing spat out a mouthful of blood. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she took a step forward, transforming into a beam of starlight as she shot towards the opening of the metal giant. She wanted to use this opportunity to enter the cave. Boom! Boom! The metal giant roared as he swung his thick right arm, sending the gigantic axe flying out. Only now did the crowd realize that the gigantic axe of the supreme being metal giant actually had another dimension. At the handle of the axe, there was actually a long chain attached to it. The gigantic axe flew out, instantly arriving behind Xianxing. Everyone was sweating profusely for Xianxing. This metal giant was truly not easy to deal with. He actually still had such a move up his sleeves. If Xianxing were to be smashed by the axe, she would really be finished. Star Cloud, Xianxing shouted as the countless astral light in the surroundings revolved around her, forming a star cloud that was tens of feet wide, protecting Xianxing within the star cloud. Kacha! The star cloud only lasted for a moment before it actually shattered. However, Xianxing was pretty smart. She immediately retreated at that moment. Although Xianxing reacted in time, the force of the gigantic axe slicing through the air dissipated and slammed into Xianxing's chest, causing her to spurt out a mouthful of blood. She immediately disappeared from the entrance of the cave. He broke in. Looking at Xianxing, who had disappeared into the cave, many cultivators in the open space were shocked. The strength that the metal giant had displayed was too terrifying. It was like a huge mountain pressing down on many people, causing them to be unable to breathe. Xianxing's strength was already considered pretty good. However, she was actually forced into such a sorry state by the metal giant. In the end, she was even almost killed by the metal giant. If it wasn't for Xianxing's high vigilance, she would have already been a dead person. The 4 old men floating in the air nodded their heads. However, that was all. Although Xianxing's strength was pretty good, it wasn't to the point where they were stunned. After all, as a supreme being, it wasn't something to be proud of if she could barely break into the supreme being metal giant. Xianxing has broken in. Zui Qifeng and K2 looked at each other and revealed excited smiles. As for Mo Lingtian, he nodded his head. With Xianxing taking the lead, many cultivators in the open space began to get restless. Most of them began to rush towards the metal giant's cave. However, most of the cultivators who rushed out were from the Xuanzuan realm and Supreme Being realm. However, what shocked many people was that most of the cultivators who rushed out to break into the metal giant's cave returned in failure. This was especially true for the Xuanzuan realm's early stage and Supreme Being realm's early stage. They were either killed by the metal giant or had good escape techniques and managed to escape. However, they were mercilessly eliminated. Most of the cultivators who were able to successfully break through the metal giant's cave were late stage and Supreme Being realm's late stage. However, cultivators of this level were relatively rare in their respective teams. Most of the early and middle stage cultivators returned in failure. Big brother Zhua, my sister, and I would like to give it a try first. Kanan, who was standing behind Zhuowen, suddenly said to Zhuowen. Zhuowen was stunned, and then he said solemnly, "You've seen how dangerous the Iron Man cave is. If we're careless, then it's very likely that we'll even lose our lives. Are all of you sure you'll be able to pass through?" Kanan and Gatha were young. Their cultivation was only in the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm, so Zhuowen was rather worried. After all, the metal giant in the metal giant's cave was cold and merciless. If one's strength was not enough, he would be killed without mercy. I think I'll be fine. However, I think my sister. Kanan looked at Gatha worriedly as he spoke. To be honest, Gatha's talent was much higher than his. However, Gatha was naturally timid. Although her cultivation was not low, her actual combat experience was pitifully little. Therefore, Kanan was worried that Gatha would have stage fright. At that time, the metal giant wouldn't show any mercy, and Gatha would be in great danger. You're worried about your sister's safety, right? Zhuowen's gaze flickered as he spoke softly. Kanan nodded and said, That's why I don't want Gatha to participate in the test. It's truly too dangerous. No, big brother, I want to enter the clan with you. Didn't you say that you wanted to revive the clan with me? Gatha spoke abruptly, and her young face was covered in a stubborn expression. Kanan shook his head and said, Gatha, didn't you see what happened just now? You've witnessed how dangerous the metal giant's cave is. How would I explain it to father and the others if anything were to happen to you? Gatha shook her head while traces of mist started to appear in her beautiful eyes. She was like a pear blossom bathed in rain, causing others to feel pity for her. Kanan was distressed when he saw Gatha in such a state. He was truly in a dilemma right now. Zhuowen smiled faintly and patted Kanan on the shoulder. Since Gatha has decided, then let her do it. As for Gatha's safety, you don't have to worry at all. As he spoke, Zhuowen's right hand condensed, and a small blood-colored spear shadow appeared in his palm. Then, it landed between Jiasha's eyebrows, forming a red line. This red line was condensed from the might of the Azura blood spear that Zhuowen possessed, and it contained the entire might of the Azura blood spear. However, it could only be used once. With the protection of this spear, the metal giant from the Xuanzuan realm would absolutely be unable to harm Gatha. As he gazed at the blood-red line between Gatha's brows, Kanan faintly sensed that it was extraordinary. Coupled with the formidable strength that Zhuowen had displayed on the boundless sailboat, Kanan didn't suspect that Zhuowen was deceiving him. Big brother Zhua, thank you so much for this. Kanan's eyes were filled with gratitude. Zhuowen waved his hand and changed the topic. Which one of you is going to go up first? Let Gatha go up first. I want to watch her. Otherwise I'll feel uneasy, Kanan said softly. Gatha nodded, and a look of determination appeared in her eyes. When a mystique venerable one flew out of the metal giant's cave in the Xuanzuan realm, Gatha dashed toward the metal giant's cave. Whoosh! Gatha arrived before the metal giant in an instant. She clenched her fists tightly, and her pretty face was slightly pale. It was obvious that she was somewhat fearful of the gigantic metal giant before her. The metal giant from the Xuanzuan realm was roughly the same as the metal giant from the Supreme Venerable realm. However, the weapon in its hand wasn't a giant axe but a broadsword. The broadsword was even larger than Gatha's, and it emitted a chilling light. Gatha, go for it. On the empty ground, Kanan roared loudly, cheering for Gatha. Many people around him looked at him with disdain. Boom! The metal giant's chilling gaze focused on Gatha. The giant broadsword in its hand slashed down fiercely, and a terrifying hurricane appeared wherever it passed. It was the sound of the blade slicing through the air. This was the result of extreme speed. Gatha's pretty face turned even paler, but she didn't back down. With a wave of her hand, a ray of blue light shot out from between her brows. She had activated her armor soul materialization right away. Gatha's armor soul was a blurry figure. However, this figure was surrounded by a cold blue aura, and it was impossible to tell whether this figure was human or not. Zhuowen's sharp eyes could see through the cold aura, and he saw that the figure seemed to be chained up like a prisoner. Heavens! This dragon lord didn't see wrongly, right? This little girl's armor soul is actually this. These two siblings aren't simple at all. At that moment, Xiaohei's horrified voice suddenly rang out in Zhuowen's mind. It was so noisy that Zhuowen wanted to punch it. Chapter 966. Heaven's Wrath Armor Soul Kid. What do you know? The armor soul on this little girl's body is on par with Jianan's undying armor soul. In fact, it is even more terrifying than the undying armor soul. Tell me, how can I remain calm? Xiaohei said loudly. Zhuowen dug his ears, but he was shocked as he asked. What? It is even more terrifying than the undying armor soul. What is the armor soul on Gatha's body? However, Blackie pretended to be unfathomable and said, "If I'm not wrong, the armor soul on this little girl should be the legendary Heaven's Wrath armor soul. This kind of armor soul is very terrifying." Heaven's Wrath armor soul? Zhuowen was stunned, and he looked at the blurry figure that had been summoned by Gatha. Was the so-called Heaven's Wrath armor soul really as terrifying as Xiao He had said? Boom! The metal man roared and his sword fell from the sky. He slashed down, and the surrounding air was torn apart. Rays of sharp sword radiance formed a barrier around them, and sealed off Gatha's escape routes. Clang! The moment the sword came down, the figure that was shrouded in cold air moved. He waved his arms and the thick chains that were wrapped around his arms turned into a net of chains. They were placed above Gatha to block the powerful sword. Bam! The two collided and there were countless sparks. Then the powerful sword stopped completely. It was as if time had stopped. Roar! The metal man roared and raised the sword in his hand again. He slashed down fiercely. This time, the power was much stronger than before. Strong winds swirled around and formed a funnel-like spiral. Crack! Suddenly, the net of chains broke apart. Then, the mysterious figure took Gatha a few steps back and avoided the attack of the sword. Looking at the scene, Zhuowen's eyelids twitched. Didn't Xiao He say that the Heaven's Wrath armor soul was very powerful? It couldn't even beat the undying armor soul? Why was it so weak? Xiao He, was this the power of the Scourge armored soul? Isn't it too weak? Zhuowen suddenly asked. What do you know? The Heaven's Wrath armored soul was too heaven-defying, too terrifying. That was why it was envied by the heavens, and suffered the wrath of the heavens. Can't you see that the Heaven's Wrath armored soul's true body is bound by chains? That chain was sent down by Heaven's wrath, and it sealed away most of the Heaven's Wrath armor soul's power, Xiao He muttered. Zhuowen's lips twitched as he said gloomily. In other words, the Heaven's Wrath armor soul is completely useless right now, even more useless than ordinary armor souls? In theory, that is indeed the case. However, there is one thing that is without a doubt. Gatha, who possesses the Scourge armored soul, can cultivate at a much faster rate than the average person. Her talent is definitely top-notch. Xiao He nodded as if she was serious. Zhuowen almost wanted to kick her. Wasn't she talking nonsense? What was the use of an armor soul that could not be used, no matter how powerful it was? However, Xiao He was currently in his consciousness, so Zhuowen could only think about it. In other words, it will be very difficult for Gatha to pass through this mystique venerable Iron Man? Zhuowen thought to himself helplessly. Since the Heaven's Wrath armored soul could not unleash its power, and Gatha was not strong enough, it would be difficult for her to pass through this Iron Man. However, Gatha still had a sliver of Zhuowen's spear aura. Even if she was not a match for the Iron Man, she should not be in any life-threatening danger. At that moment, Gatha and the Heaven's Wrath armored soul were being pushed back by the Iron Man's fierce attacks. In the eyes of the crowd, Gatha's defeat was without a doubt. However, Gatha's Heaven's Wrath armored soul had attracted the attention of many people. The Iron Man's large sword was extremely sharp. An ordinary mystique venerable rank warrior's armor soul would not be able to withstand it, and would be severely injured. However, Gatha's armor soul's body was as tough as steel. No matter how the Iron Man's large sword slashed at it, it could not penetrate Gatha's armor soul. It could only force the Iron Man to retreat. Looks like the Heaven's Wrath armored soul is indeed unique. Its body is actually so tough. Zhuowen nodded and muttered to himself. Looks like Gatha is going to lose? Kanan muttered to himself in disappointment. Roar! The difficulty of dealing with the Heaven's Wrath armored soul had completely enraged the Iron Man. The Iron Man roared angrily and took a step forward. He became extremely agile and went around the Heaven's Wrath armored soul to charge toward Gatha. The terrifying large sword suddenly descended and slashed down on Gatha's head. Gatha had not expected this turn of events. For a moment, she was so shocked that she stood rooted to the ground. She did not know how to escape. This little girl is dead for sure. The crowd sighed inwardly when they saw this scene. They all knew that Gatha's delicate body would not be able to withstand the Iron Man's large sword. She would definitely be torn into countless pieces. Many people sighed inwardly when they thought about how a young girl like Gatha was about to be torn apart in front of them. Sizzle! Sizzle! The moment the large sword slashed toward Gatha, the heaven's wrath-armored soul behind the Iron Man, which was surrounded by cold air, suddenly opened its pair of dark blue eyes. An extremely vast and terrifying aura slowly brewed. Azura blood spear. The moment the large sword slashed down, Zhuowen muttered softly. Then, the blood line between Gatha's eyebrows suddenly twisted and turned into a large blood spear. The blood spear carried with it a vast amount of blood chi. It fearlessly faced the large sword that was slashing down. Boom! The blood spear and the sword collided, and there was a terrifying explosion. Then, the Iron Man was actually forced back 3 steps by the power of the blood spear. The blood spear also buzzed and dissipated. Is that the power of the universe? The appearance of the blood spear immediately attracted the attention of the 4 elders, who were floating in the air. Their eyes revealed a trace of surprise. They were naturally familiar with the power of the Azura blood spear. That blood spear just now should be the Azura blood spear force of the grand momentum of heaven and earth. I didn't expect that someone would place this spear force on this little girl. I'm afraid it's to protect her life. The thin and tall old man muttered in a low voice. Perhaps the cultivator who comprehended the grand momentum of heaven and earth is one of them in the open space. After all, I just sensed that this spear momentum had just been stored in this little girl's glabella not long ago. A short and fat old man interrupted. It should be one of the geniuses in the open space. Let's wait. When we break through the Iron Man cave, that guy will definitely use this spear. The tall and skinny elder's eyes flashed. After the Iron Man steadied himself, he roared to the sky and rushed toward Gatha again aggressively. His body was filled with a savage aura. The spear just now had completely angered him. Originally, when the Iron Man retreated, Gatha should have immediately retreated from the entrance of the cave. However, at this moment, Gatha seemed to be scared out of her wits. She stood there in a daze, and there was no trace of blood on her face. Oh no! Gatha, run! Jianan's expression changed slightly as he shouted. Unfortunately, Gatha was scared out of her wits, and did not lift her feet to run. When the Iron Man was close enough to her, and raised the butcher's knife in his hand, Gatha sat down on the ground. Her eyes were filled with fear. Why doesn't this little girl have any battle awareness? She had such a good opportunity just now and she didn't run? The tall and skinny elder who was floating in the air shook his head, and said in surprise. As the referees, the 4 of them could not bend the law. Therefore, even though they knew that they could save Gatha, they still would not break the rules to save her. Clang! However, when the Iron Man raised his large knife, and was about to fall, his body suddenly trembled, and he stopped in his tracks. The raised knife did not fall for a long time. The warriors in the open space naturally noticed the Iron Man's strange behavior. When they looked down and saw the Iron Man's abdomen, their pupils shrank. This was because there was an arm wrapped in chains on the Iron Man's abdomen. Rip! Then the arm slowly rotated and a terrifying fluctuation spread out. Then, the Iron Man broke apart inch by inch and shattered into fine powder under everyone's shocked gazes. Among the fine powder, a figure shrouded in cold air slowly walked over. A pair of blue eyes shone through the cold air. He came before Gatha and knelt down on one knee. He lifted Gatha on his shoulder and walked into the cave with Gatha. This scene shocked everyone. The Iron Man, whose body was as hard as steel, was torn apart by the girl's armor soul. Then, the armor soul lifted the girl up in a very human-like manner and entered the depths of the cave. Was this still an armor soul? The 4 elders who were floating in the air were also shocked. The tall and skinny elder frowned and said, "That little girl's armor soul is not ordinary. Why do I feel that the armor soul seems to have intelligence? It's strange. It is indeed not simple. We have to observe this little girl carefully. If her armor soul is really an extremely powerful armor soul, this little girl is worth nurturing," the short and fat elder agreed. The other 2 elders nodded. The scene just now was indeed strange. The actions of Gatha's armor soul were too unexpected. It was as if it was not an armor soul but a human. We have to take out another mystique venerable Iron Man, the tall and skinny elder muttered softly. With a wave of his sleeve, another mystique venerable Iron Man appeared at the entrance of the cave. The Heaven's Wrath Armor Soul has intelligence like you? Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he communicated with Xiaohei in his mind. Don't compare me with the Heaven's Wrath Armor Soul. However, the Heaven's Wrath Armor Soul does have some intelligence, but it is not as good as me. Xiaohei placed his claws behind his back as he said this with a proud look on his face. Zhuowen was speechless as he looked at Xiaohei's narcissistic performance. However, he was more cautious about Gatha's Heaven's Wrath Armor Soul. The Heaven's Wrath Armor Soul was indeed extraordinary. It tore apart a mystique venerable Iron Man with its bare hands. This was not something an ordinary ancient martial art practitioner could do. Jianan clenched his fists tightly. His face was flushed red with excitement. Jianan was happy that Gatha had successfully entered the Iron Man cave. Big brother Zhua, I am going to challenge the Iron Man cave too. After Gatha succeeded, Jianan rushed toward the first Iron Man cave impatiently. Zhuowen was not too worried about Jianan's challenge. This kid had the undying armor soul, and his skin was tough. It would not be difficult for him to break through the Iron Man cave. Chapter 967. Yin Zhongyang. Not only was Jianan's skin extremely thick, even his recovery ability was extremely shocking. Even when the Iron Man's fist struck Jianan, Jianan did not dodge at all by relying on the freakish undying armor soul. He seemed as if he was going all out, and this caused many people to be secretly shocked. Bang! 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 With a punch, the Iron Man was pushed back. Jianan took advantage of this opportunity to enter the Iron Man's cave and disappeared instantly. This kid is not bad. The four old men nodded and whispered. As the test continued, the number of people in the open space decreased. However, the 3 heavenly venerables and more than 10 golden venerables did not move. Those who moved were basically mystique venerables and supreme venerables. Zhuowen and Emo Lingtian stood side by side and did not move at all. Zui Qingfeng and K2 had already set out to challenge the Iron Man. Both of them were in the middle stage of the Xuanzuan realm. Although they were strong, they were still one step behind. Fortunately, both of them had good survival skills. Although they failed to break through the Iron Man's cave, they relied on their own skills to retreat safely. However, both of them had already been eliminated. Thump! Thump! Suddenly, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and noticed a group of people walking towards them. He tilted his head slightly and looked at them. Zhuowen's eyes grew colder as he recognized one of them. Wasn't that the third prince of the Yaoguang sacred dynasty, Yuansheng? However, Zhuowen's gaze only lingered on Yuansheng for a moment before it gathered on a young man with a cold gaze beside Yuansheng. This young man's aura was much stronger than Yuansheng's. He should have reached the peak of the Golden Venerate realm. Moreover, Yuansheng seemed to have a close relationship with this person. Zhuowen guessed that this person was probably Yuansheng's second brother, Yuan Kong. As for Yuan Zhao, he was dressed in plain clothes and stood beside the other 2 celestial master geniuses. He did not even look in their direction. Perhaps in Yuan Zhao's opinion, those below the celestial master level were not worthy of his attention. You are Zhuowen? Sky Origin brought Yuansheng in front of Zhuowen and looked down coldly at Zhuowen. His voice was cold and sinister. What's the matter? Zhuowen replied indifferently. Sky Origin's eyes narrowed, and he said indifferently, looks like third brother was right. You're boundlessly arrogant. You're merely at the intermediate stage of the Exalt realm. Yet you were lucky enough to defeat my third brother. Do you think you're very extraordinary? Oh, did you come here just to say such nonsense? If you're done, then scram. Zhuowen's words were merciless. He knew that Sky Origin was here to pick a fight, so there was no need to be nice to him. You actually dare to ask me to scram? Where did your confidence come from? Sky Origin's pupils constricted slightly, and his voice was as cold as ice. You're really courting death. You actually dare to speak to my second brother like this. Do you think you're a peerless monster? If it weren't for the fact that we can't fight here, you would already be a dead man. Yuansheng also coldly interrupted. You're just a piece of trash. Do you have the qualifications to interrupt? A dignified beginner stage Golden Exalt Realm monster can't even defeat a weak intermediate stage Exalt Realm cultivator. Don't you feel ashamed? Zhuowen glanced at Yuanxing and said coldly. Yuanxing's face flushed red, but he was indeed speechless. Zhuowen's words were too ruthless. He did not have the slightest scruple and actually said that he, Yuanxing, was a piece of trash. However, back then on the deck of the boundless sailboat, he, Yuanxing, had indeed lost an arm to Zhuowen and became the former's defeated opponent. Kid, you'd better pray that you can be eliminated in the test. Otherwise, if you enter the outer courtyard, you'll die miserably. Third brother, let's go. Sky Origin coldly stared at Zhuowen, then led Yuanxing away from the open space where Zhuowen was. Emo Lingtian stood beside Zhuowen, staring at Zhuowen in surprise and said, "It seems that the enemy brothers were provoked is not to be trifled with." Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Maybe." Seeing this, Emo Lingtian did not say much. Zhuowen was very mysterious, and his strength was not weak. However, Emo Lingtian still felt that if Zhuowen was targeted by the people of the Alcade Holy Dynasty, he would not have a good ending. As time passed, 2/3 of the cultivators had challenged their respective Iron Man caves. However, only a small number of them successfully passed. Most of the cultivators either left or were killed on the spot. At this time, the geniuses of the Golden Venerables group finally moved. The first one to move was Yuanxing from the Alcade Holy Dynasty. Yuanxing naturally chose the Golden Venerables Iron Man. The Golden Venerables Iron Man held a 3-foot-long spear in his hand, looking majestic and mighty. Whoosh! Yuanxing took out the golden scepter that he had used previously. The golden scepter was a royal spiritual treasure, and its power was quite mighty. For a moment, he was barely on par with the Golden Venerables Iron Man. Boom! The Golden Venerables Iron Man roared and swung his spear, setting off a terrifying hurricane that swept towards Yuanxing. Yuanxing was forced to retreat in embarrassment. The golden scepter in his hand burst out a blazing golden light, and he managed to hold on for a moment. Whoosh! At the same time, the metal man's great spear flew over at this critical moment and blocked the golden light. Then, a powerful force exploded and the golden light shattered inch by inch. The spear swept towards Yuanxing's chest with irresistible force. Its speed was extremely fast. This spear was enough to take Yuanxing's life away. Its power was extremely terrifying. Yuanxing's eyes narrowed. He gritted his teeth and tapped his glabella with his right hand. Suddenly, an emperor's aura gushed out and turned into an illusory star that swept towards the spear. Boom! The two collided. Then, under the power of the illusory star, the great spear was instantly crushed into dust. The Iron Man was also blasted into pieces. It's the Emperor's aura again. In the open space, Zhuowen squinted his eyes. Yuanxing relied on the Emperor's aura in his body to smash the Golden Venerable's Iron Man into pieces. It seemed that the Emperor's aura was indeed terrifying. However, after Yuanxing used it, the Emperor's aura was completely exhausted. Yuanxing's face was pale. After the Golden Venerable's Iron Man was smashed into pieces, he instantly disappeared from the entrance of the cave. The 4 old men floating in the air frowned. Yuanxing relied on the Emperor's aura to smash the Golden Venerable's Iron Man. In fact, it was considered cheating. After all, the Emperor's aura wasn't Yuanxing's own strength. However, the 4 old men could feel that the Emperor's aura was extraordinary. Obviously, the Emperor Realm expert who gave Yuanxing the Emperor's aura wasn't weak. Therefore, the 4 old men didn't pursue the matter of Yuanxing's cheating. The skinny old man waved his sleeve and took out another Golden Venerable's Iron Man. He placed it at the entrance of the Golden Venerable's cave. With the Yuan sage taking the lead, the other Golden Venerate martialists also headed towards the entrance of the Golden Venerate cave. These Golden Venerate geniuses could be considered true geniuses and would have no problem entering the Golden Venerate cave. However, when it was Yuankong's turn, his gaze lingered on the Heavenly Venerables and Golden Venerables cave entrances. His cultivation had reached the peak of the Golden Venerables, and his fighting strength was terrifying. He probably had the strength to fight against an early-stage Golden Venerables. Therefore, he was a little hesitant. The Golden Venerable's cave wasn't difficult for him. However, the Heavenly Venerable's cave seemed to be too difficult. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You only have one chance. Perhaps it was because he saw the hesitation in Yuan Kong's eyes. But Yuan Zhao, who was dressed in plain clothes, spoke faintly. His words caused Yuan Kong's body to tremble. Thank you for your advice, elder brother. Yuan Kong cupped his hands together. Then, he took a step forward and rushed towards the Golden Venerable's cave. Terrifying origin energy poured out of him, as he sent the Golden Venerables flying with a punch. Then he flashed into the cave. Soon, all the Golden Venerables had entered the Golden Venerable's cave. At that moment, there were only a few thousand warriors left in the open space. Most of them were early-stage Xuanzun realm warriors. The reason why they hadn't made a move yet was mainly because they weren't confident in their own strength. After all, most early-stage Mystique Venerables were mercilessly killed when they stepped into the Mystique Venerable's cave. Only a few lucky ones managed to escape with their lives. Brother Mo, why haven't you made a move yet? Zhuowen suddenly asked as he looked in surprise at Mo Lingtian, who hadn't made a move at all. Mo Lingtian smiled faintly. Brother Zhua, haven't you made a move yet? Moreover, the three Heavenly Venerables haven't made a move yet. Before we enter, we naturally have to observe the three Heavenly Venerables. Otherwise, we won't be able to see much of the scenery. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. It seemed that Mo Lingtian planned to wait for the three Heavenly Venerables to enter the Heavenly Venerable's cave before making a move. Zhuowen also had the same idea. The sun was high in the sky and became even more scorching hot. There were originally a few thousand people left in the open space. But now, there were only a few hundred people left. The 5 geniuses of the Qingxian Empire had all finished their tests. What surprised Zhuowen was that Grand Lily and Guosheng had successfully entered the Mystique Venerable's cave. As for the other 3, they had all been eliminated. Moreover, Huangfu Wuji was the weakest of the 5. He had died in the Mystique Venerable's cave. Looking at this scene, the Qing Emperor, who was standing in the distance, had an ugly expression. Of the only 2 geniuses of the Qingxian imperial family, one had died in the hands of Zhuowen, and the other had died in the outer yard test. It was quite sad. At this moment, the large open space appeared to be rather deserted. It was a stark contrast to the bustling scene from before. Finally, the 3 Heavenly Venerables who had been motionless finally moved. The Blue Whale Dynasty's crown prince, Yin Zhongyang, stood up, his sharp eyes filled with arrogance. Let me experience the power of this Heavenly Venerable's Iron Man. With a loud shout, Yin Zhongyang spread his wings like a rock and instantly flew in front of the Heavenly Venerable's Iron Man. His right hand formed into a claw and fiercely shrouded down, wanting to completely destroy this Heavenly Venerable's Iron Man. Yuan Zhao and Palm Tree, who were sitting cross-legged in front of the open space, opened their eyes and looked at Yin Zhongyang and the Heavenly Venerable's Iron Man. This was the first time the Heavenly Venerable's Iron Man had been challenged. After all, among the 30,000 geniuses, only the 3 of them had reached the Heavenly Venerable's level. Are they finally going to make a move? The 4 old men floating in the air looked sharply at Yin Zhongyang. The reason why the 4 of them had waited so patiently was because of these 3 monstrous geniuses. At the age of 25, their cultivation had reached the Heavenly Venerable's level. They were the top geniuses in the outer yard of the Jiaxun Academy. Therefore, in the hearts of the 4 old men, the 3 of them were much more important than the other 30,000 geniuses. Now that one of the 3 monstrous geniuses, Yin Zhongyang, had made a move, the 4 old men were naturally watching closely, not letting go of any mistakes. The Heavenly Venerable's Iron Man was the tallest and thickest of the 4. He was 50 feet tall and held a long blade in his hand. The blade emitted a sharp cold light, looking extremely terrifying. Creak! Chapter 968. Terrifying Yuanjiawush. A terrifying saber radiance flashed. The saber radiance revealed an indomitable sharpness. The sharpness was so terrifying that it seemed to be able to cut and shatter space wherever it passed. The heavenly man unleashed the terrifying saber radiance right from the start. He did not show any mercy and was aiming to take Yin Zhongyang's life. As the saber radiance swept out, the faces of the weaker cultivators on the ground turned pale. Just the sharpness of the saber radiance gave them an illusion that they could not resist. They knew that if they were to face the saber radiance, they would definitely be torn apart. Oomph! Yin Zhongyang snorted coldly. His right hand reached out into the air and turned into a claw. He clawed fiercely and immediately, a dark blue energy surged out from his body. It was like a vast ocean as it surrounded him. In the end, it turned into a gigantic blue whale. Blue whale submersion. The coldness in Yin Zhongyang's eyes grew stronger. The gigantic blue whale formed from countless strength chi in front of him roared and suddenly swooped down, rushing towards the celestial sovereign. Boom! When the saber radiance and the blue whale collided, there was an explosion of air waves. However, what shocked everyone was that the blue whale was at a disadvantage under the saber radiance. It retreated step by step and was on the verge of collapsing. Yin Zhongyang frowned. He pressed down with his right hand, and an even more terrifying aura surged out. Then, the surrounding ocean surged with waves that were taller than the previous one. The blue whale's aura became several times stronger along with the terrifying waves. Bang! The sharp saber radiance collapsed inch by inch under the blue whale's aura. It was annihilated into nothingness. The blue whale instantly rushed out and enveloped the heavenly man. Thump! 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 The heavenly man roared angrily and swung his saber. Countless saber radiance flashed and formed a saber radiance hurricane that swept out. Unfortunately, the blue whale's aura was too strong. Even though the saber radiance was terrifying, it was still broken by the blue whale. The heavenly man retreated 3 steps. When the heavenly man retreated, Yin Zhongyang could have taken advantage of this gap to break through the heavenly man's defense and enter the cave. However, Yin Zhongyang did not do so. Instead, he controlled the blue whale and continued to rush towards the heavenly man. It was obvious that Yin Zhongyang wanted to defeat the heavenly man. At the same time, he wanted to show off his talent and strength to the 4 elders floating in the air. This Yin Zhongyang is unruly. He's not satisfied with just passing the heavenly man's cave, and won't give up until he turns the heavenly man into scrap metal? Mo Lingtian muttered in surprise. Just as Mo Lingtian had guessed, Yin Zhongyang was planning to do exactly that. However, it was obvious that he had made the wrong decision. The Celestial Exalt possessed the strength of a peak Celestial Exalt. Coupled with its steel-like body, it was impossible to destroy the Celestial Exalt. The more Yin Zhongyang fought, the more shocked he became. The sturdiness of the Celestial Venerate's body was beyond his imagination. Even though the blue whale's power was multiplied, it still couldn't break through the Celestial Venerate's body. Instead, because it had angered the Celestial Venerate, the Celestial Venerate went all out and completely suppressed the blue whale. Boom! Boom! The heavenly man punched out with his left fist and forced the blue whale to retreat. Then, the saber in his right hand slashed down mercilessly. The heavenly man did not block the blue whale's attack. He only focused on attacking. Boom! Soon, the huge blue whale was turned into blue powder. By the heavenly man, Yin Zhongyang's expression turned ugly. Humph! It seems that I have underestimated you. As he spoke, Yin Zhongyang clenched his right hand, and the surrounding ocean surged with monstrous waves. The celestial venerate iron giant that was charging at him stopped in its tracks for a moment before Yin Zhongyang let out a furious roar. He no longer faced the celestial venerate iron giant head-on. Instead, he sped up and entered the celestial venerate iron giant's cave. Yin Zhongyang's talent is not bad. However, his personality is too unruly. If he can change that, he will achieve great things in the future. The skinny old man nodded and praised. The other elders also nodded in agreement. Yin Zhongyang's talent and strength were top-notch, but his personality was a little too arrogant and unruly. Such a state of mind would not be very beneficial to his future development of martial arts. This Yin Zhongyang is asking to be humiliated. How dare he try to destroy the heavenly man? Palm Master of the 10,000 Sword Sect said as he slowly stood up. His eyes shone with a sharp sword light. He stood there like a peerless sword. As soon as he said that, everyone's eyes fell on Palm Tree. They knew that Palm Tree was ready to make a move. Palm Tree was a sword cultivator, and his combat strength was much stronger than the average warrior. They wondered how Palm Tree would perform. Chi Ji, who was also a sword cultivator, could not help but look at Palm Tome with his sharp eyes. Although Palm Tome's cultivation was lower than his, Palm Tome had the advantage of being younger and more talented than him. He knew that if Palm Tome successfully entered the outer yard, he would be able to catch up to him in a few years. After all, when Chi Ji was Palm Tome's age, he was only a golden venerate. Whoosh! Pom Pom did not hesitate in the slightest. She took a step forward and rushed toward the celestial Iron Man cave. Her body exuded an extremely sharp sword light. The sword light was like starlight enveloping Pom Pom. The heavenly man was still in a frenzy. When he saw Palm Master coming, he roared and slashed out with the long handle in his hand. Countless terrifying sword lights swept out. Let's see if your blade is stronger or my sword is stronger. Pom Pom let out a long roar and formed a sword sign in his hand. A sharp longsword appeared in his hand. Pom Pom then slashed the longsword in front of him. Countless sword lights flashed and turned into a sword light storm. Sword Force. Zhuo Wen, who was in the open space, was slightly startled when he saw the palm tree slash out with its sword. Soon after, a solemn expression appeared on his face. This palm tree was not simple. It had actually comprehended the force of heaven and earth. Moreover, it had comprehended the force of heaven and earth. Bang! 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 The sound of metal clashing echoed intensely. Then, the blade light of the heavenly venerate was instantly extinguished by the palm sword aura. Then, the heavenly venerate was pushed back by the sword aura, a deep sword wound appearing on its chest. His physical body is really strong. My sword force could only leave a sword mark on his body. Palm Master frowned. He knew that it was not worth it to spend so much energy on the heavenly man. He wasn't like Yin Zhongyang, who was arrogant and wanted to show off. Therefore, the Pom Pom sword changed its stance and turned into a thick layer of sword rain in front of him. His entire body turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the cave entrance. The Iron Man seemed to have some intelligence. He knew that the Pom Pom sword was not to be trifled with, so he did not give chase. Palm Master is even more talented than Yun Zhongyang. He actually comprehended the force of sword. Although his personality is a bit arrogant, he is still much better than Yun Zhongyang. His potential is even greater than Yun Zhongyang's. He is worthy of our outer yard's nurturing. The four old men looked at each other and saw a hint of joy in each other's eyes. Originally, they were already very satisfied with Yin Zhongyang's talent and potential, but Palm's performance was even more powerful. Naturally, they were extremely excited. I wonder how Yuan Zhao is. This child looks ordinary, but he's actually hiding his strength. Even I can't see through Yuan Zhao. The tall and skinny elder's gaze suddenly landed on Yuan Zhao, who was dressed in plain clothes as he spoke. We will know when we see him. Yuan Zhao is the strongest genius of the Alcade Sacred Dynasty after all. Moreover, the Alcade Sacred Dynasty is the leader of the four sacred dynasties. He won't be any weaker than Palm Master. The other three old men nodded. After Palm Master left, Yuan Zhao slowly stood up. His eyes were as indifferent as water from the beginning. Yuan Zhao's every move attracted everyone's attention. Naturally, they also wanted to know if the last heavenly venerate freak would be able to surprise them. Whoosh! Yuan Zhao took a step forward and appeared in front of the heavenly man, as if he had teleported. He quietly looked down at the heavenly man. With a roar, the heavenly venerate spun his long saber. Saber chi swept out, creating a gust of saber light and sword shadow that shot towards Yuan Zhao. The heavenly venerate was infuriated after two people had passed through his cave. Now that Yuan Zhao was here, he naturally vented his anger on him. Hence, he used his full strength from the get-go. Yuan Zhao quietly floated in the air. His expression was still as indifferent as water. He didn't seem to be surprised by the terrifying blade hurricane that was sweeping towards him. Yuan Zhao finally made his move when the blade gale neared him. He stretched out his right hand and clenched it. Strangely, the space before him seemed to have been displaced, and the blade gale was actually torn into pieces. Die! Yuan Zhao spat out this word calmly. Then, he clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and a strange force descended. It was an invisible force, and the heavenly honorable metal man froze. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, it shattered into countless pieces of metal. Whoosh! Yuan Zhao patted his sleeves. His gaze was still indifferent and calm. He then slowly entered the heavenly man's cave. The entire open space fell into silence. Everyone's gaze was focused on the countless pieces of metal at the entrance of the cave. They still felt like they were dreaming. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. The celestial venerate metal man was not a mystique venerate metal man. Its body was tens, or even hundreds of times harder than a mystique venerate metal man. Yin Zhongyang and Pom Pom, the 2 celestial venerate monsters, had not been able to shatter the celestial venerate metal man, but Yuan Zhao had effortlessly torn it into pieces. The crowd wasn't stupid. They all knew what this meant. Yuan Zhao's strength was much stronger than Palm Master and Yin Zhongyang. Middle Stage Heavenly Master? Yuan Zhao's cultivation has reached the Middle Stage Heavenly Master. This kid has been hiding his cultivation. He only showed his true strength when he faced the Heavenly Man. Chapter 969. Choosing the Heavenly Venerate Iron Man cave. The remaining hundreds of cultivators in the open space were all shocked. Yuan Zhao's strength had far exceeded everyone's expectations. He had actually destroyed the Heavenly Venerate Iron Man cave in one move. Yuan Zhao's cultivation was at the intermediate Heavenly Venerate realm. He was stronger than Yin Zhongyang and Palm Deva. But he had concealed his cultivation and kept a low profile. Whether it was his temperament or strength, Yuan Zhao was much stronger than Yin Zhongyang and Palm Deva. He was terrifyingly powerful. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, and a cautious look appeared on his face. Yuan Zhao's strength had far exceeded his expectations. Moreover, this kind of person who knew how to hide himself was much more terrifying and frightening than the average warrior. Geniuses who can reach the Heavenly Venerate realm before the age of 25 are indeed extraordinary. This is a true peerless genius. Emo Lingtian's eyes were filled with envy as he muttered to himself. Zhuowen nodded in agreement. Whether it was Yin Zhongyang, Palm Deva, or Yuan Zhao, the 3 of them could be said to be dragons among men. They were like cranes in a flock of chickens, among more than 30,000 cultivators. They had left the other cultivators far behind. Zhuowen knew that if he were to face these 3 monstrous geniuses, he would only have a chance if he used the power of the demonic Tao. However, this was Zhuowen's trump card, and he wouldn't use it easily. Brother Zhuo, since the 3 monstrous geniuses have finished their tests, I think it's time for me to go in. Emo Lingtian smiled at Zhuowen. He took a step forward and flew towards the Iron Man cave. What surprised Zhuowen was that Emo Lingtian was actually heading towards the Golden Venerate Iron Man cave. A peak sovereign challenging the Golden Venerate Iron Man cave. Is this person courting death? There were only a few hundred cultivators left in the open space. Naturally, they noticed Emo Lingtian's actions, and their eyes revealed a trace of disdain. Previously, there had already been a peak sovereign who had challenged the Golden Venerate Iron Man cave in order to obtain better resources. Of course, the final outcome was that the peak sovereign genius had been blasted into smithereens by the Golden Venerate Iron Man cave. Therefore, Emo Lingtian's action of charging towards the Golden Venerate Iron Man cave was an act of overestimating his own strength and seeking death. The 4 old men, who were about to leave, also noticed Emo Lingtian's actions and stopped in their tracks. The Golden Venerate Heavenly Venerate Iron Man cave was the Heavenly Venerate Iron Man cave. They had seen the 3 monstrous geniuses, so they naturally wouldn't stay here for long. However, Emo Lingtian's actions of challenging those above his level had piqued the interest of the 4 elders. Since they were not in a hurry to leave, they might as well see if Emo Lingtian could pass the golden exalted Iron Man cave. Roar! The golden venerate Iron Man roared, and swung his 3-foot spear towards Emo Lingtian. He wanted to annihilate Emo Lingtian completely. Emo Lingtian was as calm as still water. He stomped his foot in the air and terrifying flames surged out, surrounding Emo Lingtian's body. The flames looked extremely strange. They were purplish-blue in color. Furthermore, the purplish-blue flames were constantly converging and flickering like blooming violets. They looked noble and mysterious. It's actually the purple flame. This is one of the top 3 earth fires in terms of power. It's extremely terrifying. Emo Lingtian's luck is pretty good to be able to obtain such an earth fire. Zhuowen couldn't help but click his tongue in amazement when he saw the purple flame surrounding Emo Lingtian. Zhuowen had a total of 8 earth fires, but none of them were as powerful as the purple flame. Only the fire of the sun, which was much more powerful than ordinary earth fires, might be comparable to the purple flame. Zhuowen also knew that the Flame Emperor should have a unique secret technique to use the flames. Emo Lingtian was the most outstanding disciple of the Flame Emperor. Naturally, he could use the earth fire to the point of perfection. Furthermore, he could use it better than Zhuowen. Boom! Countless purplish-blue sparks spread out like 100 blooming flowers. The 3-foot spear stabbed into the countless sparks and suddenly stopped. It was actually obstructed by the countless sparks and couldn't move an inch further. Purple flower bloom! Emo Lingtian's indifferent voice rang out. Then the 100 flowers slowly bloomed, and the temperature rose to the extreme. However, when the countless purple flowers bloomed to the extreme, they all exploded. The power of the 100 flowers gathered together and formed a terrifying power that could shatter heaven and earth. Dang dang dang! Even though the golden exalt metal man's aura was vast, he was still forced to take a few steps back by this power. Emo Lingtian naturally wouldn't let go of such a great opportunity and entered the cave in a flash. This kid is not bad. The 4 old men nodded, but that was all. Up until now, only Yin Zhongyang, Palm Master, and Yuan Zhao were able to make them reveal expressions of praise. The others had not amazed them to such an extent. Emo Lingtian's entry caused quite a commotion in the open space, but it didn't last for long. After all, after the strong performance of the 3 heavenly exalts, Emo Lingtian's performance paled in comparison. No one felt shocked. After Emo Lingtian left, Qi Ji slowly stood up and cupped his hands towards the 4 elders in the sky. For instructors, the group of people that I'm in charge of have all finished their tests, so I'm preparing to wait at the entrance of the Iron Man cave. For instructors, the group of people that I'm in charge of have also finished their tests and are planning to head to the entrance of the Iron Man cave. Hu Jia stepped out and similarly spoke. Since the people that you 2 are in charge of have finished their tests, then you 2 can go. The skinny old man nodded and said with a wave of his sleeve. Qi Ji and Hu Jia heard this and cupped their hands. Qi Ji directly left, while Hu Jia said a few words to Cheng Dong and also left the open space. Cheng Dong, there are still more than 200 people left in the group that you're in charge of. Do you still want to continue the test? The skinny old man turned his head and suddenly asked Cheng Dong. The skinny old man could tell with a glance that the remaining 200 people in the group that Cheng Dong was in charge of were basically all at the early stages of the Xuanzuan realm and the early stages of the Sovereign realm. They were all weaker warriors. The main reason why they hadn't entered the Iron Man cave yet was because they weren't confident in their own strength. They were afraid that they would be killed by the Iron Man if they weren't careful. Cheng Dong looked at the 200 people behind him with a headache and secretly cursed his bad luck. Why did the geniuses that he was in charge of have such poor quality? Moreover, it was fine if they were poor. But why didn't they even have the courage to enter the Iron Man cave? Let me do it. Suddenly a calm voice sounded. Immediately after, a slender young man walked out from the crowd that was still hesitating. This young man had shoulder-length black hair and a rather fair face. Although he wasn't a beautiful man, he was still pleasing to the eye. This person was Zhuowen. Now that the test had come to an end, Zhuowen naturally couldn't stay any longer. So it's you. Be careful, this Iron Man cave isn't easy to pass. If you can't pass it, you can give up. This way, You won't have to throw your life in vain. Chengdong naturally recognized Zhuowen. During the basic test, Zhuowen accidentally broke Wu Sheng's blood crystal. It was Chengdong who took out his blood crystal to shut Wu Sheng up. Zhuowen nodded and said politely, "Thank you for your reminder, senior." After saying that, Zhuowen rushed towards the Iron Man cave, while Chengdong nodded his head. Although the young man in front of him was at the middle stage of the sovereign realm, he knew that this child shouldn't be too simple. However, Chengdong was still quite depressed. Whether it was Qi Ji or Hu Jia, the group of people they were in charge of had all passed through the Empyrean Iron Man cave. Only the group of people he was in charge of, Chengdong, had not passed through the Empyrean Iron Man cave. Furthermore, after the end of this recruitment, he, Chengdong, would undoubtedly obtain much less benefits than Hu Jia and Qi Ji. However, he also knew that this recruitment also depended on luck. After all, the 3 testing grounds were placed there, and could not be moved. It was their freedom to take the test in any plaza. It was just that Chengdong was too unlucky. Not a single one of the 3 great Empyrean monsters came to the plaza he was in charge of. What is this kid doing? Why did he go to the Empyrean Iron Man cave? Is there something wrong with his head? That's right. A mere sovereign realm warrior actually went to the Empyrean Iron Man cave. Is he courting death? Suddenly, an uproar broke out in the open space, immediately waking up Chengdong, who was still in deep thought. Following that, Chengdong was shocked to see that Zhuowen was actually rushing towards the Empyrean Iron Man cave. After that, Zhuowen stood in front of the cave entrance. "Junior brother, you've walked into the wrong cave. You're standing in the Empyrean Iron Man cave, and you're only at the middle stage of the sovereign realm. Don't go up there to court death." Chengdong was stunned for a moment, then immediately advised Zhuowen. A sovereign realm challenging an Empyrean Iron Man? This was a joke, right? This had never happened since the opening of the Divine Academy's outer court. The most monstrous genius was a golden sovereign realm warrior challenging an Empyrean Iron Man cave. A sovereign realm warrior challenging an Empyrean Iron Man cave was definitely courting death. "Senior Chengdong, I didn't walk into the wrong cave. I want to challenge the Empyrean Iron Man cave." Zhuowen didn't feel that there was anything wrong as he smiled faintly. When Chengdong heard this, the first thought that came to his mind was that Zhuowen definitely had something wrong with his head. A sovereign realm warrior challenging an Empyrean Iron Man cave was actually a disguised form of suicide. However, Zhuowen didn't wait for Chengdong to speak. Instead, he raised his head and stared at the 4 old men above. "Seniors, please release another Empyrean Iron Man cave. This kid would like to test the might of the Empyrean Iron Man cave." The 4 old men's faces twitched. In their opinion, Zhuowen's actions were also courting death. Among the 4 sovereigns, there were some monstrous geniuses who could challenge an Empyrean Iron Man cave. However, the 4 old men had never seen someone who could challenge an Empyrean Iron Man cave. Of course, they didn't think that there would be any monstrous genius who could challenge an Empyrean Iron Man cave. After all, the gap between a golden sovereign and an Empyrean Iron Man cave was already huge enough, not to mention the gap between a sovereign realm and an Empyrean Iron Man cave. You have to pay a price to challenge an Empyrean Iron Man cave. Do you think you can bear such a price? You should know that if you're careless and lose, you might die. The skinny old man narrowed his eyes. This kid naturally knows that. This is a decision I've made after careful consideration, Zhuowen said faintly. In that case, this old man won't persuade you. You're on your own now. Chapter 970. Breaking through. The 4 elders' faces were cold. The tall and skinny elder had advised Zhuowen not to overestimate himself and lose his life. However, the young man in front of them didn't appreciate their advice and insisted on challenging the Honorable Heavenly Metal Man cave. How could they be nice to him? After all, they had far more experience than this young man in front of them. Moreover, they had stayed in the outer court for a long time, so they had seen all sorts of geniuses. But they had never seen a martial artist jump 2 levels to challenge an Empyrean Iron Man when they had just entered. This had nothing to do with courage, but it was a kind of courting death. Moreover, Zhuowen's persistence made them feel that their dignity had been affected. Therefore, they were a little impatient and sneered in their hearts. Chengdong, arrange for the remaining people to take the test. After the test, head to the exit of the Iron Man cave. We will go to the exit and wait for the results. The skinny and tall old man instructed Chengdong. Immediately, he glanced indifferently at Zhuowen before leading the other 3 old men and leaving this place. Chengdong responded respectfully and immediately transmitted his voice to Zhuowen. Junior brother, stop fooling around and come down quickly. The Honorable Heavenly Metal Man Cave hasn't been activated yet. It's not too late to regret. Your strength should be pretty good. If you want to challenge the Honorable Heavenly Metal Man Cave, you will definitely be able to enter. Why risk your life to challenge the Honorable Heavenly Metal Man Cave? Zhuowen shook his head and said, Senior brother, don't worry, I'm just giving it a try. If I can't pass, I'll just give up on the outer court's quota. In fact, Zhuowen's main goal was the resources in the Honorable Heavenly Metal Man Cave. After all, the 4 caves were divided into 4 levels, and the resources stored in each level were definitely better than the previous one. Now, ordinary spirit treasures and medicines weren't of much use to Zhuowen. After all, his strength far surpassed his cultivation. Things that were suitable for a Supreme Being realm martial artist weren't suitable for Zhuowen. And with Zhuowen's personality, he would naturally use the best. Thus, he had already decided to enter the Empyrean Iron Man Cave. Chengdong felt a little helpless. However, since Zhuowen had already said so, it would be unreasonable for him to continue persuading him. Therefore, he could only silently watch as Zhuowen walked towards the heavenly venerate iron statue. The 200 people standing behind Chengdong all had sneers on their faces. Their thoughts were similar to Chengdong's. Zhuowen's behavior was simply courting death, so they treated it as a joke. In fact, the scene of Zhuowen being smashed into a bloody pulp by the celestial venerate began to appear in many people's minds. The ridicule in their hearts grew even more intense. Whoosh! Zhuowen held a bloody spear in his hand. At the same time, the mind power in his Naiwan palace gushed out and summoned the infinite sword array to revolve around his body. The heavenly venerate iron statue was very strong, so Zhuowen naturally didn't dare to be careless. Chengdong also saw the infinite sword array around Zhuowen and muttered, He's actually a grade 5 arcana master. No wonder he wants to challenge the heavenly venerate iron statue. Chengdong was rather surprised that Zhuowen possessed mind power. However, he still wasn't too optimistic about Zhuowen. After all, the gap between the Supreme Being realm and the heavenly venerate realm wasn't something that mind power could make up for. Roar! The heavenly venerate iron statue roared. The new heavenly venerate iron statue wielded 2 meteor hammers. With a swing of its hands, the meteor hammers turned into 2 streams of light that swept towards Zhuowen. It wanted to completely crush Zhuowen to death. Thousand sword style. Zhuowen formed a sword seal with his right hand, and the infinite sword array split into 1,000 giant swords. Then, the 1,000 giant swords fiercely flew out and swept towards the meteor hammers that had turned into 2 streams of light. Bang! 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 The sound of metal clashing rang out continuously. Then, Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he discovered that the 2 streams of light were extremely powerful. The 1,000 giant swords couldn't even leave a single mark on their bodies. Many of the giant swords were even blocked and sent flying by the terrifying streams of light. Zhuowen took 3 steps back. The sword seal in his right hand changed again as he roared. Flowing sword style, block for me. Suddenly, the 1,000 giant swords turned into streaks of sword light. These streaks of sword light began to rotate continuously, forming a terrifying storm of sword light. At the same time, Zhuowen took a step forward, and the bloody spear in his hand pierced forward. It turned into an illusory bloody light that swept towards the 2 streams of light. Boom! Boom! The storm of sword light swept out and blocked one of the meteor hammers in the stream of light. Zhuowen displayed the Azura blood spear style and summoned an endless sea of blood. He stepped on the sea of blood and swept towards the other stream of light without fear. Spear style. Chengdong's eyes were sharp. Naturally, he saw the power of the spear style that Zhuowen displayed. A trace of surprise appeared on his face. First, it was a 5th-grade mental strength. Now it was the power of the force of heaven and earth. The young man in front of him had great talent and potential. No wonder he was so arrogant and wanted to challenge the Iron Man. However, Cheng Dong shook his head secretly. With the means that Zhuowen had displayed, Cheng Dong knew that if the former's strength had reached the Golden Venerable Realm, the chances of him succeeding in challenging the Iron Man would be very high. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the Sovereign Realm. The crowd behind Cheng Dong also saw Zhuowen's extraordinariness, and each of them revealed a surprised expression. Bang! Zhuowen displayed the Azura blood spear style. With a swing of the bloody spear, the sea of blood swept out along the tip of the spear and slammed heavily on the meteor hammers. Then, Zhuowen discovered that there was an extremely terrifying force coming from his hands. Dang! 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 Zhuowen involuntarily retreated a dozen steps under the tremendous force. The webbing between his thumb and index finger was faintly ruptured, and cherry-red blood flowed out. What a terrifying force! Zhuowen's pupils shrank. The tremendous force contained in the meteor hammer shocked even him. Looking at Zhuowen, who was at a disadvantage, Cheng Dong shook his head and whispered, "After all, the difference in cultivation is too great." The remaining 200 people had already recovered from their shock. At this moment, when they saw Zhuowen in such a sorry state, the mockery on their faces became even more intense. These 200 people were the weakest, and the weakest in the group that Cheng Dong was in charge of. Therefore, they did not dare to take the test. They were afraid that they would fail and die, or they would be eliminated if they failed. Earlier, when they saw how powerful Zhuowen was, they felt a trace of discomfort in their hearts. In fact, since Zhuowen didn't make a move for so long, they had already classified Zhuowen as someone like them. Now, the person that they thought to be one of them had suddenly erupted with such great strength. Anyone would be surprised. However, after the surprise, they felt uncomfortable in their hearts. Or rather, they could not bear to see others doing well. They could not wait for Zhuowen to die in the hands of the Iron Man. Roar! While Zhuowen was doing his best to resist the power of the meteor hammer, the Iron Man also moved. He directly rushed towards Zhuowen and arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. He grabbed the meteor hammer that stopped in front of Zhuowen, raised it high, and hammered it down fiercely. This kid is finished. Looking at the meteor hammer that was raised high, many people in the open space ridiculed without any scruples. Dragon's aura. Zhuowen, who was suppressed, was extremely calm at this moment. He did not show any fear because of the meteor hammer that was about to fall. A ray of light shot out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Then, a huge 3-legged cauldron appeared in front of Zhuowen. Then, a dragon's roar resounded from the huge cauldron. The moment the dragon's roar sounded, a huge dragon's aura gushed out from the cauldron. There were a total of 81 dragon's aura, and each dragon's aura was 100 feet long. They intertwined with each other, forming a dragon sea. It was a huge sea formed by many huge dragons. Boom! The meteor hammer heavily smashed down, hitting the dragon's aura. Then it stopped on the surface of the aura, unable to move an inch. It blocked it? This is this kid's armor soul? Looking at this scene, Cheng Dong could not help but be stunned. He stared at the 81 dragon's aura, and the huge cauldron below the dragon's aura as he muttered softly, "Now is the time." The instant the meteor hammer froze, Zhuowen's eyes flashed. Then, 3 pairs of lightning wings sprouted from his back. He turned into an illusory thunderbolt and circled around the Iron Man, disappearing from everyone's sight in an instant. As for the dragon's aura and the greater infinite sword formation, naturally, Zhuowen withdrew them the moment he went around the Iron Man. Zhuowen, who used the 6 wings of Tempest, was too fast. It was so fast that even the Iron Man did not expect it. Therefore, when Zhuowen completely disappeared from the cauldron, the Iron Man looked around in confusion. However, there was no sign of Zhuowen at all. At that moment, the empty space fell into an extremely strange silence. Whether it was Cheng Dong or the 200 people behind him, They all stared at the entrance of the Iron Man cauldron in a daze. Until now, they still could not believe that Zhuowen had entered the Iron Man cauldron so easily. This kid has a lot of tricks up his sleeves. Moreover, he is very good at using his advantage of speed. He did not confront the Iron Man head-on. Chengdong slowly came back to his senses. Soon after, his eyes were filled with excitement. Originally, he thought that among the group of people he was in charge of, no one would be able to enter the Iron Man cauldron. However, Zhuowen had given him a big surprise. I wonder what the 4 mentors will think if they see Zhuowen at the entrance of the Iron Man cauldron. Chengdong muttered softly. He actually began to look forward to the reaction of the 4 elders at the entrance of the Iron Man cauldron. After all, the 4 elders were extremely dissatisfied with Zhuowen's actions of entering the Iron Man cauldron. He actually made it through. Isn't this too unreal? A mid-stage Supreme Being Martialist actually made it through the Iron Man cauldron? The remaining 200 people in the empty space were in an uproar. Zhuowen had actually made it through the Iron Man cauldron. Many of them even thought that they were dreaming. Could it be that the new Iron Man cauldron is just a facade and doesn't have the strength of a heavenly being? Suddenly, a mid-stage Supreme Being Martialist questioned. He took a step forward and also rushed towards the Iron Man cauldron. Zhuowen was a mid-stage Supreme Being. He was also a mid-stage Supreme Being. He began to suspect if there was a problem with the Iron Man cauldron that the skinny elder had taken out. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.